Good afternoon. This is Patsy Bryson, the Chair of the Board of Zoning Appeals for the town of Hilton Head Island. I will call to order the Monday, April 26, 2021 regular meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals. It is now 2:30 p.m. Ms. Haley, are we in compliance with FOIA?
Yes, ma'am, we are.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Haley, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Walzak?
Present.
Mr. White?
Mr. White, I think you're muted. We can see you. He's waving his hand, Ms. Haley. I see Mr. White in attendance. We just need to get him unmuted.
Thank you. Ms. Loudermilk?
Present.
Mr. Johnson?
Present.
Mr. Fingerhut?
Present.
Dr. Ponder?
Present.
Ms. Bryson?
Present. Ms. Haley or Ms. Lewick, could you help me introduce the town staff members who are present for the meeting? I can see some of them on the screen, but not all of them.
Certainly, Madam Chair. We do have Diane Bush on the line, Terry Lewis, Nicole Dixon, Missy Lewick, Tyler Newman, and Curtis Coltrane.
Thank you, ma'am. And Ms. Bush and Mr. Coltrane are both attorneys for the town of Hilton Head Island. I welcome all who are here for the meeting, board members, staff members, and applicants, as well as any members of the public who are going to be commenting or who are listening. At this time, I'll talk a little bit about the procedures that the Board of Zoning Appeals follows. We have two requests for variances today, so I'm only going to detail the procedures for a variance hearing. It is important that the Board of Zoning Appeals, as a quasi-judicial board, ensure fair and impartial hearing for the applicants and for staff. In doing that, we follow both procedural and substantive due process. And in order to do that, we follow the requirements of law, including the town code, state statutes, and also the rules of procedure for the Board of Zoning Appeals. For variances, the substantive standards are found in subsection 16-2-103S of the Land Management Ordinance of the town of Hilton Head Island. The rules of procedure for the board for variances are found in Article 7, and I'm going to review those procedures at this time. First of all, the staff has a maximum of 20 minutes to present the facts and applicable legal principles that staff believes support the position of staff with respect to the application for a variance. During the presentation by staff, members of the Board of Zoning Appeals may ask such questions as they deem appropriate. At the discretion of the chair, staff's time may be extended if the staff is unable to complete the presentation due to questioning from the Board of Zoning Appeals. The applicant then has a maximum of 20 minutes to present the facts and applicable legal principles that the applicant believes supports the application for a variance. During the presentation by the applicant, members of the Board of Zoning Appeals may ask such questions as they deem appropriate. At the discretion of the chair, the applicant's time may be extended if the applicant is unable to complete the presentation due to questioning from the Board of Zoning Appeals. The staff shall have a maximum of 5 minutes to present any desired rebuttal. We also provide 5 minutes for the applicant for rebuttal as well. Following the presentations, the Board of Zoning Appeals may ask such additional questions of the applicant or staff as the members deem appropriate. There is public comment allowed for variances. The chair will call on interested persons and request that they come, in this case, not to the podium, but by telephone. And for one of the variances, we do have someone who wants to make public comment, and at that time, I will call for that public comment, and Ms. Haley will assist with connecting that person by telephone. Each person who makes a public comment has a maximum of 3 minutes. In all cases for the timing, Ms. Haley will gently and kindly be our timekeeper. At the end of the presentation and the close of the public hearing, the board will then consider its action on the application for variance. Pursuant to the provisions of the Land Management Ordinance, the board will either then approve the application for variance, approve the application for variance with conditions or modifications, or deny the application for variance. Following the vote, the staff prepares a written notice of action, including the decision of the board, as well as the findings of fact and conclusions of law adopted by the board with respect to the application for variance. The notice of action shall then be mailed by certified letter to the applicant and record owner of the real property affected by the application for variance, if different from that of the applicant. The decision of the Board of Zoning Appeals shall be deemed final and applicable upon mailing of the notice of action, and thereafter the applicant has the right of appeal if they choose to do so. That summarizes the procedure for variances. So at this time, I will ask for approval of today's agenda. Does the staff or do any board members have any changes to the agenda?
Staff has no changes to the agenda. Thank you.
Any board members have changes to the agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion by a board member to approve the agenda?
So move.
So move, that's Ms. Loudermilk. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by
White.
Mr. White. Thank you. Any discussion? If not, Ms. Haley, will you please call the roll on the motion?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Walczak,
For the motion.
Mr. White,
For the motion.
Ms. Loudermilk,
For the motion.
Mr. Johnson,
For the motion.
Mr. Fingerhut,
For the motion.
Dr. Ponder,
For the motion.
Ms. Bryson.
For the motion. Thank you. The motion is adopted. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals for March 22nd, 2021. Are there any changes to the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the March 22nd, 2021 minutes?
So moved.
Mr. Fingerhut makes the motion. Is there a second?
Charlie will second.
Mr. Walczak seconds the motion. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Ms. Haley, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Walczak,
For the motion.
Mr. White,
For the motion.
Ms. Loudermilk,
For the motion.
Mr. Johnson,
For the motion.
Mr. Fingerhut,
For the motion.
Dr. Ponder,
For the motion.
Ms. Bryson.
For the motion. The motion is adopted and the minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is appearance by citizens. Ms. Haley, will you address any comments, appearance by citizens?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Public comments concerning agenda items were to be submitted electronically via the Open Town Hall portal. Portal comments were provided to the board for review and made part of the official meeting record. Citizens were provided the option to give public comment during the meeting by phone. There was one request to give public comment by phone during the public hearing for variance application VAR 00235 2385, 2020, 12 Circlewood Drive.
Thank you, ma'am. The next item on our agenda is unfinished business, and the chair knows of no unfinished business. So we move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is new business. And at this time, I will open the public hearing on the application for variance 002385-2020, a request from Dennis Antochia for a variance from LMO sections 16-5-102 setback standards and 16-5-103 buffer standards to allow a shed, paver pathway, and paver patio to remain in the adjacent use setback and buffer. The property address is 12 Circlewood Drive with a parcel number of R510-005-000-0341 0. At this time, I would call on Mr. Newman for the staff presentation with a 20-minute maximum time period. Mr. Newman, you may proceed.
Tyler Newman, Senior Planner for the record. Right, we can go ahead and jump to the next slide. Again, the request is a variance from Land Management Ordinance Sections 16-5-102 Setback Standards and 16-5-103 Buffer Standards to allow a shed, paver pathway, and paver patio to remain in the adjacent use setback and buffer. The subject property, 12 Circlewood Drive, which is highlighted in red, was developed in 2018 and purchased by the applicant in July of 2018. The subject property is located in the Beach City Place subdivision. The Beach City Place subdivision was approved in 2015 under subdivision sub-001864-2015. The subdivision is located off from Beach City Road and is primarily surrounded by undeveloped vegetated parcels as well as several single-family residences, all of which are zoned RM4. The Beach City Place subdivision was approved with a 20-foot adjacent use setback and buffer around the perimeter of the entire subdivision. That 20-foot setback and buffer is highlighted on the subdivision plat shown on the screen. And on this next slide, you will see the subject property, 12 Circlewood Drive, which is shown as Lot 6. You'll see the boundaries of the property, or the setbacks and buffers of the property highlighted, and down at the bottom left, you'll see that that indicates that that is a 20-foot building setback line and buffer. In June of 2020, the applicant applied for a building permit for a proposed 11-foot by 12-foot screen room addition. After the plans were reviewed and approved by town staff, a building permit was issued as well as stamped town approved plans, which you'll see on the screen. The plans that were associated with the screen room addition had a bold red note that delineated the rear adjacent use setback and buffer in red, no disturbance or clearing in the buffers to include, but not limited to, stairs, HVAC, utility equipment, etc. In early September of 2020, the applicant had an 11 by 13 foot paver patio constructed at the rear of their residence, a portion of which encroaches into the required 20-foot adjacent use setback and buffer. In late September 2020, the applicant had an 8 by 12 foot shed installed in the rear of their property within the required 20-foot adjacent use setback and buffer. Following the installation of the shed and paver patio in early November 2020, the applicant had a paver path installed in their backyard, which encroaches into the required 20-foot adjacent use setback and buffer. The town does not require a building permit for the construction of a paver patio and paver path. Additionally, the town does not require a building permit for the installation of a residential shed that is smaller than 120 square feet. However, a shed is considered a structure and therefore cannot be located within a required adjacent use setback and buffer. The applicant stated that prior to having the shed installed, they contacted the town staff to inquire about the necessary approvals for the proposed work and were correctly told by staff that a building permit was not required. However, according to the applicant, staff neglected to mention that the shed could not be located within a required setback or buffer. In addition to contacting town staff, the applicant also received approval from the Beach City Place Architectural Review Board prior to installing the shed, and that would have been attachment G in the staff report that was sent out to everyone. Here you'll see some photos of the pathway, patio, and shed in question. In November 2020, staff received a complaint that a shed, pathway, and paver patio had been installed within the required rear adjacent use setback and buffer at the subject property. It should be noted that once town staff was made aware that the shed was located within the required 20-foot adjacent use setback and buffer, it was also determined that the applicant was running electricity to the shed, which would have required an electrical permit prior to any electrical work being completed. A violation letter was sent to the property owner with notice of the violations and with a deadline for the removal of the encroachments to apply for the required electrical permit or the option to apply for a variance. And that violation letter would have been attachment H in the staff report that was sent out. The applicant is requesting a variance to allow the existing shed, pathway, and paver patio to remain in the adjacent use setback and buffer. On the screen, you'll see 2 more photos of the shed in question. Now we are going to begin with the variance criteria. Variance criteria 1. There are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. The subject property is 0.14 acres in size. The subject property is larger than the majority of other properties in the Beach City Place subdivision. However, it is one of the smaller lots located in the corners of the subdivision, which range in size from approximately 0.13 to 0.22 acres. Staff finds that the subject property does not contain any unique site features that prohibit development on the lot. Based off these findings, staff concludes that this application does not meet the criteria because there are no extraordinary or exceptional conditions that pertain to the particular piece of property. Variance criteria number 2. These conditions do not generally apply to other properties in the vicinity. The majority of the lots in the Beach City Place subdivision are very similar in both size and shape. A 20-foot adjacent use setback and buffer is applied to all properties located on the perimeter of the subdivision, with the exception of Lot 7, which is adjacent in the rear to Beach City Place open space. Staff concludes that this application does not meet the criteria because there are no extraordinary and exceptional conditions that pertain to this particular piece of property that do not generally apply to other properties in the vicinity. Variance criteria 3. Because of these conditions, the application of this ordinance to a particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. The approved subdivision plat for the Beach City Place neighborhood requires a 20-foot adjacent use setback and buffer in the rear of the subject property per LMO sections 16.5.102 setback standards and 16.5.103 buffer standards. The approved subdivision plat for the Beach City Place subdivision has a note that reads, "The only activities permitted in the exterior subdivision buffer, as labeled on this plan, shall be those listed in permitted activities in other buffer areas as per the land management ordinance." A 2-story single-family residence with 2,167 heated square feet, 443 unheated square feet, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and a garage has been constructed at the subject property. The as-built survey that corresponds with the construction of the existing single-family residence has a note which reads, "All building setback requirements should be verified with the proper authorities prior to design and construction." An 11 by 12 foot screened room addition has been constructed at the subject property. The approved plan that corresponds with the construction of the existing 11 by 12 screened room addition has a note that delineates the setback and buffer and area and reads no disturbance or clearing in the buffers to include, but not limited to, stairs, HVAC, utility equipment, etc. And here is a copy of the as-built survey associated with the original building permit for the single-family residence constructed at the subject property. There I've highlighted the 20-foot building setback line. Based off these findings, staff concludes that this application does not meet the criteria because there are no extraordinary or exceptional conditions that pertain to this property that unreasonably prohibit the use of the property. The applicant was able to construct a single-family residence as well as a screened room addition that were both in compliance with land management ordinance standards. Criteria number 4. The authorization of this variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or the public good, and the character of the zoning district where the property is located will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. Staff was initially made aware of the violation because of a complaint from another resident within the Beach City Place subdivision. At the time that the staff report was written, staff has received no letters of opposition to this specific variance request. The purpose of the adjacent use buffer standards is to spatially separate development from adjacent development with aesthetically pleasing natural or landscaped buffers. The purpose of the adjacent use setback standards is to provide separation between structures and property lines. Such separation is intended to maintain and protect the town's island character and facilitate adequate air circulation and light between structures and adjacent developments. Staff concludes that this application does not meet the criteria as set forth because the variance will be of substantial detriment to the adjacent property. The purpose of setback and buffer requirements is to provide visual and spatial separation between developments and mitigate the negative effects between adjacent uses. Staff finds that none of the 4 variance criteria were met with this application. Therefore, staff recommends the denial of the application. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Before we go around with questions by board members, I think it's important to note in the record, Mr. Newman, you indicated at the time the staff report was prepared, there were no letters in opposition, but the record furnished to the board indicates that there was one letter received by you in opposition to the request with some photos attached. Is that correct, Mr. Newman?
That is correct, and I believe that was forwarded on to everyone this afternoon.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
At this time, we'll have questions of Mr. Newman from board members, and we follow a rotating order with different board members having the chance to go first or last or in the middle at different times. So this rotation starts with Mr. White. Do you have questions, Mr. White?
No, Madam Chairman, I do not have any questions.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Johnson, do you have questions?
I have no questions, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Fingerhut, do you have questions?
I do not. Thank you.
Mr. Walczak, do you have questions?
No, I do not. Thank you, Mr. Newman, though. Good job.
Ms. Loudermilk, do you have questions?
I do have just one, and I'm not sure that the actual pertinence, but I think there is some. There is a wooden, I believe, wall around the perimeter of the subdivision itself, or at least part of the subdivision. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Or at least at the subject property, there is a fence at their property, and I believe I don't know definitively because I didn't look at the fences at every property, but I believe that there is a fence surrounding the subdivision as a whole.
Okay, so my real question is, if you know the answer, who owns the fence?
I do not have an answer to that off the top of my head.
Okay.
It could be the property owners association, but I don't know that definitively at this time.
Okay, and maybe the applicant can answer that subsequently. Okay, thank you. That was really my only question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Ponder, any questions from you?
No.
I'm sorry, Dr. Ponder, did I hear a no?
No, I don't have any questions at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So that brings to the chair. I do have a couple of questions, Mr. Newman. You mentioned during your presentation that a shed is determined to be a structure. And is there a particular provision in the LMO where a shed is determined to be a structure? Or is that an interpretation by staff?
It's considered a structure if you look at the definition.
Oh, that's what I was going to pull up. I'm pulling up the actual definition of structure right now. I believe that it may be mentioned specifically in there. Okay, the LMO defines a structure as anything constructed, installed, or portable, the use of which requires a location on a parcel of land. Structure includes a fixed or movable building which can be used for residential, business, commercial, agricultural, or office purposes either temporarily or permanently. Structure also includes, but is not limited to, swimming pools, tennis courts, signs, cisterns, sewage treatment plants, sheds, fences, and gates. Docks, mooring areas, and similar accessory construction. So yes, ma'am, it does specifically call out sheds.
Okay, thank you, sir. And then I apologize that the copy that I have does not show attachment letters or numbers. I'm looking at page 23, which is a site plan by Porch Outfitters Construction. And it says pre-construction meeting notes, and there's some handwritten notes on there. I don't know whether you have that available in front of you. I'm sorry, that's the only way I can tell you. It's page 23 in the agenda package, other than it's a site plan by Porch Outfitters Construction Company, showing the screen room addition.
I don't have that pulled up in front of me. I think Teresa's trying to get that pulled up right now. If you can bear with us for just one moment.
Sure, sure. My question has to do with there's several handwritten notes, and I've tried to enlarge that document on my screen, but and believe me, my handwriting is terrible. So I'm just trying to understand if there's anything on that particular document that has to do with either the pavers for the patio, the pathway, or the shed. I do not think so. I think it's about the screen room addition, but I wanted to make sure that none of those notes provide any evidence regarding the issues at hand.
Nicole, we have that pulled up on the screen, and Nicole just looked over those, and she indicated that they do not.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
And my last question is for the paved patio itself, not the pathway nor the shed, but the pavers and the patio itself. Have you determined a square footage amount that encroaches within the 20-foot buffer? It looks as though it goes diagonally through that patio.
It is, yeah, it's not the entire patio that's located within there. And I was actually regrettably noticed that as I was preparing for this today, that I don't have that exact square footage of encroachment. Of course, the only area in question would be the area that is actually encroaching into the setback and buffer.
And it appears as though the 20-foot setback line goes diagonally through that area. So would it be about half of that paved patio area that encroaches?
Give or take, yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. Any other questions from board members at this time of the staff? Okay. We'll move on now to the presentation by the applicant. Once again, there's a maximum of 20 minutes, and Ms. Haley will be our kind and gentle timekeeper. And am I saying it correctly, Antochia? And Mr. Antochia, are you available?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, sir. I can hear you.
Yes, it's Antosia.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I guess I'd like to show a few pictures and things first. That's okay.
Yes, sir. And the staff will assist you if there's any difficulty in sharing of your screen, so you may proceed.
Okay. Do we put up the site plan first, or does this matter? Do that. Okay. So this is the site. Whoops, we lost it. Hang on a sec. Give us 1 second here.
That's okay. We'll give you a little bit more time out of your 20. We won't count on your 20-minute time, the technology communications. So you can proceed when you're ready, sir.
Okay. So can you see the slide now? See that picture?
Yes, sir. Any board members cannot see it if they'll let us know.
Okay. So that's the site plan that was given to us at closing. At the time of closing, we were told, and there was a 20-foot easement between our properties, and it shows a separate easement between the property of ours and property of lot 7. You can move on to the next one. Okay. Yeah, this is just the architectural review. We can go down through this kind of quick. This is what we sent to the ARC, to our, subdivision, to our HOA basically, and some of the documents we sent actually along with riser drawings and everything, what we wanted to do originally, including the screen porch thing that wasn't done yet. This was, I don't have the date written down when this was sent in, but this is this is the improvements that we had designed way before we ever started, sent to the HOA, the ARC, and this next thing right there is sent to the board, and the one person on the board is an architect, and this is his email back to us saying that you can read what it says. Okay, so the next screen, and so this is what he sent after. They approved it, and they wanted to use us as an example on how to present. Okay, that's that. Go to the next one, I guess. No, there's one more. Isn't there a Beach City Place lots? Oh, did we have it? Oh, right there, just that one. Yeah, you don't need that. You've seen that already. You can go to the pictures. Okay. Yeah, let's go back to that one you just showed. I'm sorry, we're not I'm fumbling around here. Right there. Okay, that's also showing the whole subdivision with all the houses.
Excuse
You
me.
lost the screen.
We
You lost your screen.
There we
go.
All right.
There we go.
So that is showing Beach City Place subdivision. It has a fence all the way around the perimeter of the whole complex. It's missing a piece in back of lot 7, but other than that, it's complete. And that fence is actually it's owned by Beach City Place. So that is, and we don't know how far in the actual fence is inside the Beach City Place parking or Beach City Place property line, but you can see there too, lot 6 and lot 7 have a 20-foot easement between them. Okay, that's what we were given. This is what we were given at closing and told. Okay, let's move on to pictures, I guess. These are just pictures of what we ended up doing, the improvement that got done. Everything got done that year. This is the end of it. That's the paver path from the front of the house looking back. There's the shed. Moving on. Keep going. Yeah. There's a big tree in the back. There's a shed. There's a space you can see between the shed and the fence. There's 16 inches of property, and you can kind of see the on top how much the roof overhangs, which is not very far, and how much space there is there between the shed and the fence. Okay, move on. Oh, this is just from inside the house looking through the screen porch outside, just pictures, that's all. Okay. Same thing. Keep going. Okay. This is a view from the entrance of the Freedom Park. That's nice. Yeah. This and the shed is here. Can you see the shed is? You can barely see it. It's right there. This is taken right from the entrance, right from the entrance of the Freedom Mitchellville Park. There was a picture taken of showing that they from a comment from one of the neighbors that said that it's not, that this is what it looks like from the entrance. That picture was actually taken about 40 feet. It wasn't taken from the entrance of the park. It was taken from inside that area, just in back of our fence, about 30 or 40 feet in back of our fence. So this, anyway, that's all on pictures, I guess. Okay. Now I'm just gonna have a drink for 1 second. So that's my breath. Okay. So I'm just gonna read this because I'm not a great speaker. Okay. I am a homeowner, and I am bound by decisions of the Board of Directors. With that understanding, I have made contact with them and sought permission for the improvements my wife and I have made on our property. I have made certain improvements with the board's approval. We did not receive any complaint from any neighbor until we had expended time, money, and effort. I wonder why the delay. If I had the time and you had the patience, I could give you a chronology of the difficulties I have had with the neighbor. I understand some of you may be acquainted with her. The difficulties we have had have been most unpleasant and have greatly upset my wife and I, who have moved into the community hoping to find a peaceful place to retire. Because of one of the difficulties we had with our neighbor, we found it necessary to file a police report to make a record of one specific instance resulting from the action of our neighbor. There are many other incidences. Our expectations to find a peaceful place to retire have not been met, to say the least. The complaint the city has against us relates to improvements we have made that we think are consistent with improvements others have made in the HOA, and frankly, if you could see them, are an improvement and make our neighborhood appear more attractive. Having said that, a question that occurs to me, which I think is important, is if there is a concern about a problem on property within the boundaries of the HOA, why are my wife and I singled out? And why isn't the city asking the HOA to take action rather than targeting one member of the HOA? Why was there a delay in informing us when one who was aware of what he or she believed was a violation? How might the city respond to the question? Will targeting one member of an HOA result in inconsistent policy as it pertains to the HOA, to the entire HOA? In other words, is this circumstance a problem for the HOA or just one member of the HOA? If it is a problem only for one member of the HOA, of what significance are the covenants which are to bind the members of the HOA, and what significance are the decisions of the board? I have a very real concern as to why the city is targeting me when I have complied with the decisions of the HOA. Given my honest opinion, I believe for reasons I do not understand that my wife and I are not being treated fairly. I understand you may say, but we are governed by the ordinance. My response to that are questions. Why are we really here? Who or what is really behind this and why? Thank you for listening to me. My wife and I had hoped and dreamed to move into a peaceful, kind, and quiet neighborhood, but our hopes and dreams have not been met. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. At this time, we'll have questions from board members, again, in a rotating order. Questions of the applicant. First from Mr. Johnson. Any questions, Mr. Johnson?
I have no questions.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Fingerhut, any questions from you?
Just a couple, thank you. My question is for the applicant. Can you point to anything unusual, extraordinary, or exceptional about your particular lot that affects where you can put this shed, other than the size of the lot itself, which was of course known when you purchased it? But is there something else about it that would permit us to view compliance with the law as somehow unreasonable?
Well, why don't you, can I have somebody else talk here a second? He knows a little more about this. So there is an easement between our properties.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Yes, sir. You may, if you can introduce who it is, or they can introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Jeremiah Dunn with Greenscape Services. And we did some of the design work and the planting here. And there is an easement between the two properties there where the buffer kind of goes away and then comes back. But you also know about the size of the lot. And this was, and they're not quite sure how far back the boundaries go outside the fence at the same time too, as to know really where that 20-foot starts and stops at. Although, as it appears that it comes to the corner of the house here.
I'm not sure that answers your question, but is there any, can you clarify anything else you'd like to know?
The easement you're describing, is there, I guess first, how wide is it? If just you could, I think you may have said it, but it slipped away from me, excuse me. And also, is the easement throughout the property, or does it just affect your lot?
It's a 20-foot wide easement, and it starts from the street on Circlewood Drive, and it goes all the way through the lots, and it goes back to the utilities back in the back area. So it doesn't really affect. It's actually, I think originally it was an easement that nobody can own, and then it apparently the neighbor gained access to that somehow, that easement, gained ownership of that easement. But I'm not sure. And then in back of that area, it's a open spaces that Beach City Place owns.
Madam Chairman?
Yes, sir.
This
Mr. Johnson, is that you?
Yes. While we're talking about this, can we not get this put up on the screen so everybody can see it?
Yes. I don't know whether the staff can help us out. I'm looking at the subdivision plat,
we're going to get the PowerPoint presentation pulled back up. The zoomed in view of the property actually shows the easement pretty well. It's located on the adjacent property.
Yes, I'm looking at the recorded subdivision plat, which shows that 20-foot utility easement going across lot 7. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. I believe we have it pulled up now. Can everyone see it?
Yes, that's very clear. Yes, thank you.
Right. So, Mr. Fingerhut, I think it's still with you for questions.
No, I have no more questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Walczak, questions from you?
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about, the easement. Can we see the site plan now? Can you put that up too?
Mr. Newman, can you assist us with that? Unless the applicant wants to show something.
We can, yeah, there you go. That's fine.
Okay. All right, go.
We're going to pull up the as-built survey if that works.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, should be pulled up for you there.
Doesn't show that's the as-built of the original house. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And then the 20-foot easement shown over to the right of it there.
But how about the improvements? Do you have a site plan with the improvements? I thought we saw something there that you passed. It was kind of the
we have the
landscape plan. Right. Yeah, at least that's somewhat.
All right, that should show it there.
Okay. So the screen porch is not in question here, correct? Or does it actually go through just the corner of it, or does it just miss it, or what?
The screen porch is not included in this request at all. They got the appropriate approvals for it, and it was permitted and CO'd.
Okay, now the property line that's in question, the 20 feet to the property line, beyond that property line is the easement, correct?
Correct.
A 20-foot easement.
Correct, but the setback in question is on the rear of the property, and the easement is on the side of the property. The easement really has no bearing on this request.
I'm trying to see. In other words, doesn't the easement parallel the side of the shed?
Yes, sir.
Words, right. Looking at this drawing that's on the screen, it would be the diagonal going on the left-hand side there. That's the easement on that side. So in other words, the shed abuts the easement.
The shed's essentially in the corner of the property to where it would have the vacant space behind it, and then to the left of it is lot 7, which also contains the easement.
There's not enough visual here. I'm trying to. In other words, is the buffer, the 20-foot buffer, up against the easement?
No.
Oh, okay. That's what I'm trying to figure out here.
No, like I said, the easement has no impact on this request at all.
But the buffer does not, or the 20-foot does not go through the easement. It doesn't pick up until the other side of lot 7.
If you're looking at it from the perspective of whether or not they have a setback or buffer from the easement, the only setback and buffer that they have on that side is 5 feet.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Right. And then the shed is against the lands of Edith and Moultrie or something there. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And but is that the boundary of the property? So that's where the boundary fence is?
Yes, sir. That's the exterior boundary of the subdivision.
And that boundary fence is a solid, opaque fence, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And I'm just kind of thinking out loud. So, according to the LMO, the purpose of the easement is to provide visual separation.
You mean buffer?
Yeah, the buffer. I'm sorry, the buffer. The 20-foot buffer is the purpose is to provide enough, let's say, foliage and whatever, to provide enough privacy from the neighbor.
Visual and spatial separation, yes, sir.
Visual and spatial. All right, well, in this case, we have a visual separation with the appeared to be 6 to 8 foot high fence, no?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that Mr. Walczak, we need to give the applicant a chance to respond to the questions. I know Mr. Newman has been responding, and I think I feel like we need to ask the applicant if he has any information different from what the staff has conveyed in response to your questions. So
That's a solid fence all in the back, and then you can almost see in the background of the camera. This is the white PVC fence that runs on the property line.
And that's Mr. Dunn responding, I understand.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Mr. Walczak, do you have questions of the applicant or Mr. Dunn about?
Yeah, my
those
questions
you've
were
been
for,
asking?
I realize we do this formally, but my questions are really for everyone because it's a two-sided thing here.
Sure.
I'm just trying to justify the purpose of the buffer. I understand why it's there, but if there is some mitigation already because of the fence, perhaps there should be some consideration of that. That's all I'm getting at, and I wanted to make sure I was on the right line and all that. That's why I was asking all those questions.
Sure,
So,
sure.
All right, that's it for now. Okay, thank you.
I just want to make sure if the applicant had a different opinion about the questions you're asking, that they had the opportunity to do that. So sure.
Okay, well, Mr. Antosia, do you have anything
Yes.
to add there on that? What I was getting at?
I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, it is a solid fence that it was put in for the HO for the Beach City Place. It's a nice, well-built fence all the way around the property and of the subdivision, and it is to provide that separation, and it's also to for the HOA to be able to kind of dictate, or not dictate, but set up a board and make decisions on their property.
Mm-hmm.
So, and hopefully it does provide the separation needed from other properties.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Walczak? Thank you, sir. Ms. Loudermilk, questions from you of the applicant.
I do not have any other questions.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Dr. Ponder, questions from you of the applicant.
I do not have any questions.
Okay. And Mr. White, questions from you of the applicant.
Just one. Based on when you're looking at the plat, obviously there is a border fence in the rear. Is there also a fence on the sides of your property?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Just on one side of our property.
Between 5 and 6?
No, between 6 and 7. Between 6 and then the easement is actually it's right along the easement, that white fence.
I see. Okay. Thank you very much.
You bet.
All right. Anything else, Mr. White?
No, thank you.
Okay. Then that's the questions from me. And my question would be for the location of the shed. If the shed needed to be moved, would there be another place on the property where the shed could be moved? As I'm looking at your lot 6, it would be closer to lot 5, I believe. Could the shed be moved there?
Actually, there are a couple of big trees there that would make it difficult to put it there. The shed could be moved from the location a little bit from where it's at, but not a lot. If other than that, it would probably have to just be removed.
Okay. And I understand that there's electrical power to the shed. Is that for lighting, or is there equipment being run out of the shed?
No equipment. No equipment. It's just for a light.
Okay.
And at the time, I'm actually a licensed electrician. I've been licensed for 35 years. So at the time, I didn't know the rules here that there was a permit. And then as soon as I found out that you needed a permit, I actually applied for one through the city, And then I talked to somebody with the city, and she sent me things I was going to apply for it. And then I talked to Tyler Newman, and he said, don't bother, because we have to see if this even, what happens with this variance. If this gets approved, then yes, I will apply for a permit, electrical permit.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other questions from board members before we move on to staff rebuttal? Okay, no other discussion from board members. Mr. Newman, you may have up to 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Staff has no rebuttal.
Any questions of staff at this point? I do have one question, Mr. Newman. In addition to the 20-foot buffer line that we've been talking about, I'm looking at the plat. So the plat that I'm seeing is that's not only a buffer line, but it's a building setback line. Is that also a 20-foot setback requirement from the LMO as a result of approval of the subdivision plat?
Yes, ma'am.
So not only would these improvements be within the buffer area, but also within the building setback, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Now it's time for any rebuttal from the applicant. The staff had no rebuttal, but I did ask some questions. So anything further from the applicant?
We pretty much covered this over.
Yes, thank you. Well, the only thing I can think of here is when we moved in, we were told, and of course you might know the whole story, I don't know, we were told by the developer and by the seller that, and we personally asked that question before we bought a house or anything, are we allowed to put a shed in the setback area? We didn't know there was a buffer. They allowed to put it with us, and they also told everybody else that moved into this neighborhood, the 42 houses, yes, they can put anything in that area as long as it's not on concrete. That's what the understanding was. That's what we were told. And we are just honest people. We didn't know that people are not honest. And so we just went by their word. And I guess that was wrong. And so actually everything we did, we thought we were doing the right thing. We didn't know we did anything illegally. We tried to do everything correctly, and we just got found out the hard way. And it would have been nice to find out in September when we first put a shed in, and not in the end of November or beginning of November when we after we completed all the other work. And it would have been nice to know then, because it would have saved us a lot of headache and money before we we spent a month and a half putting that paver path in. We could have known, if we'd have known that shed was wrong, which we didn't have an idea it was, we would have stopped work then. I guess that's it. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, sir. This is now the time for public comment, and I'm confirming that there were written comments provided to the board through the town's portal and made available as part of the record today. In addition, there was a separate letter to Mr. Newman with photographs that were made available to the board and are included in the record today. Ms. Haley, I understand that Susan Mosher is on the line, if I'm pronouncing the last name, and I apologize if I didn't do that correctly, is on the line, is requested to speak regarding this variance. Ms. Haley, can you confirm that she is on the line and available? And if so, we would be ready to hear from her.
Yes, Madam Chair. Miss Susan Mosher is on the line. Ms. Mosher, if you would like to give your public comments, you have 3 minutes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Again, as was stated, my name is Susan Mosher, and I live at 8 Circlewood Drive. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I want to, first of all, thank the board for the opportunity to speak at this hearing. And as you may know, I submitted written comments as a Beach City Place property owner who lives near Dennis and Jan Natasha In those comments, I offered my support for the variance request, and I reiterate those comments here. Today, I would like to speak in my capacity as the Secretary and Treasurer of Beach City Place Homeowners Association and expound upon the written comments provided by Sheila Levy, our HOA President, and to reemphasize that the HOA is unanimously advocating for the approval of the variance request. We believe that the improvements made by the Antosias have enhanced our community, and so do the owners like myself and my husband, who can view the improvements from their property. The HOA board believes that the town guidelines for setbacks and buffer zones should not be applicable here due to our perimeter fencing, which already creates a buffer between our property and all adjacent properties. And I just want to pause my remarks to answer one of the questions. I was actively involved in the recent amendments to our covenants, and I can confirm that the perimeter fence is indeed an HOA asset. It's expressly stated so in the covenants. As noted in our written comments, we value the fencing, and every homeowner will be contributing to an annual budget designed to maintain it. Due to the limited size of each lot, adhering to the current setback and buffer guidelines creates an undue hardship for all lot owners, except for the complainants whose lot abuts the subdivision's open space and provides them with extra land area that factors into their 20-foot buffer zone. As Ms. Levy mentioned, in many cases, the adherence to these guidelines brings the buffer and or setback right up to the rear footprint of the home. Certainly, when the town approved the lot sizes during the development, it should have been apparent that the 20-foot rear setback was not practical, rendering no practical creative use for any community backyard. And this is a shame, given that our fencing produces the buffer that the guidelines intended. Now that our community lies within the recently approved workforce zone, housing zoning, we respectfully request that the town consider our community considered for 5-foot setbacks and buffers, which is what all our future neighbors will enjoy here in the Mitchellville area. This would help provide a solution for the variance request before you and prevent the Antosias from having to remove their visually pleasing improvements. This concludes my remarks, and thank you for your time today. I'll take any questions anybody might have.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions from board members? Thank you, ma'am. At this time, we will incorporate into the record all the evidence presented, including the reports by the staff and also by the applicant, and the testimony and documents presented to the board through the application, the staff report, and during today's hearing. In addition, we have incorporated into the record the public comments through the portal and also the separate letter sent to Mr. Newman in opposition with the photographs, and also the comments made by members of the public, and that would include the comments we just received from Ms. Mosher. Any objection to including all of that information into the record? Hearing none, I will now close the public hearing on this application and ask for board discussion on this matter, beginning again in a rotational order. And this time, Dr. Ponder, you get to be first.
I think this is another very hard to take situation where a homeowner has been, I want to say, led astray, perhaps. If what you say, sir, is true, and I have no reason to let me say, then your HOA and some other supports here probably have not done you a great service. That said, and as much as it pains me to say so, we have criteria that we are allowed to consult in these kinds of cases, and you must meet all of them. And to my mind, you haven't met any of them, unfortunately. And I don't know anything about what your neighbor may or may not have done, or may or may not be involved in this situation, how or why, or any of that. But that is also not within our purview to consider. I think it's regrettable, but I am inclined to deny the variance. I just don't see where we have the criteria for it.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Mr. White, thoughts or discussions from you?
I agree with Dr. Ponder. It's very unfortunate because I do believe that the fence presents itself as a means of really separating space. But unfortunately, that's not what the LMO calls for. So I would concur with Dr. Ponder's position.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Johnson, comments from you?
Well, this is an unusually shaped lot, which doesn't really affect the fact that it's a hardship, other than I think that it does have the ability to accommodate a shed on the side of the house. So with that being said, I'm in favor of denying the variance.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Fingerhut, comments or discussion from you?
Yes, thank you. This, although all applications turn on their unique facts, and they do, including this one, this seems to be something we're seeing a lot of now. Very small lots are being platted by developers, being sold to people who build very nice homes on them, but that leave very little room for anything else. I mean, it's literally the nature of the lot itself. And as sympathetic as the applicant is, and he certainly is, I don't see how. I mean, the only way to grant this was just to decide we're not going to follow the law, and we have to follow the law. And so I don't see that there's any way we could grant this under the existing land management ordinance.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Walczak, discussion from you.
Yes, I mean, I have to agree with my colleagues here, but I really think, this particular, because the lots are so small, as David said, yet the buffer seems to be not compatible in size, let's say, to the lots. So it could be that there's really something wrong with the LMO when you have lots this tiny, because it does take up a lot of property. And the fact that the fence is there bothers me, because they are, in essence, with the fence, meeting a part of the LMO requirement. The fact that it's visually protected. So that's where I'm at a half and half point here. I realize we cannot go against the law, but I think that some of this should be looked into, because, like you said, David, there's a lot of this going on now, and it's unfair to the owners of the property. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Ms. Loudermilk, discussion from you.
Yeah, going this late in the order, I guess it's, I want to say it's easy for me to say I totally agree with all of the aforementioned comments. I think the fence, as has been stated before, accomplishes the visual and spatially required separation that the LMO is seeking. However, it doesn't preclude the existence of the current 20-foot setback. And I think we need to, stay focused on that. I am curious from staff, Ms. Mosher, I believe, near the conclusion of her comments, did talk about the possible opportunity to replat the subdivision and reduce the setback to 5 feet. I don't know if that's something that may be done at this point in time, again, assuming homeowner concurrence, or if that's just a wishful thought. So I don't know if staff could possibly speak to that issue on a reduced setback.
In order for them to alter the subdivision plat, it would require 100% agreement from all of the property owners within the subdivision. I'm not sure where the 5-foot setback came from. The absolute minimum that would likely be able to go to would be 10 feet.
Okay, and I understand that it would require the 100%, concurrence or approval. But, and again, not for us to decide today, but I'm wondering if that might be a future option. So I don't have any other comments.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Then the chair again goes last in the order of discussion. I concur with the comments of my colleagues. Again, I compliment the applicants on the attractiveness of their improvements, and am sympathetic to enjoying a peaceful community. But because the shed is clearly a structure under the LMO, and is within the building setback line in addition to the buffer line, then I do believe that the shed must be relocated, either removed or relocated on the site, and if relocated to a place that complies with the requirements. The fence, I appreciate that there's some buffering to a fence, but generally for buffering, in addition to a fence, there would be plantings. In this case, I do not see that the standards required for approval of a variance have been met. The paved area, the pavers themselves, of course, are going within the setback and buffer area, except for the paved patio. A portion of that would appear to be allowed, so perhaps a portion of the patio could remain. Don't know how that could be accommodated, but I would not be inclined to approve all of the patio remaining within the setback and buffer area. So I would also join my colleagues in saying that I would vote to deny this variance. Any other discussion from the board before I ask for a motion? Hearing none, is there a motion on this application?
Well, Madam Chair, I move that the application be denied based upon the findings of fact and conclusions of law of town staff.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second, I'm sorry, is that Mr. Johnson or Mr. White? I'm sorry.
Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Johnson, second by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Ms. Haley, will you call the roll on the motion vote?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Walza?
For the motion.
Mr. White?
For the motion.
Ms. Laudermill?
For the motion.
Mr. Johnson?
For the motion.
Mr. Fingerhut?
For the motion.
Dr. Ponder?
For the motion.
Ms. Bryson?
For the motion.
Motion?
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Haley.
Certainly. Motion to deny the application passes unanimously.
Thank you, ma'am. It is indicated, as I explained during the procedures at the outset of our meeting, a notice of action will be prepared and signed by the board members who made the motion and the chair, and will be sent to the applicant. And we thank you for your application to us, and we will move on to the next item of business. And that is to a public hearing on variance 000-818-2021, a request from Edward K. Pritchard III for a variance from LMO sections 16-5-102 setback standards. Sorry, we have a little background noise. I'll wait on that. 16-5-102 setback standards and 16-5-103 buffer standards for an existing non-permitted food truck and associated screening fence to remain in the required adjacent use setback and buffer. The property address is 15 Marshland Road with a parcel number of R510-008-000-013H quadruple O. And I understand that the either the town attorney or the staff attorney will be making a statement with regard to, at this time we would normally have a staff presentation. So do I call, I see Mr. Coltrane. Do I call upon you, Mr. Coltrane, or Ms. Bush?
Yes, ma'am. I can do this, and I've spoken to Mr. Pritchard earlier today. The variance application that is before you now comes to you out of a mediation conference that was between the applicant, Mr. Taiwan Scott, and the town. And the town will not take a position for or against Mr. Scott's variance application. It advocates nothing. And I was asked to advise the board on that point.
Okay. Any questions of board members of Mr. Coltrane regarding that statement?
Yes, I have a question. I have several, actually.
Oh, Dr. Ponder.
Is this, Mr. Coltrane, is this usual? Is this normal? Is there a reason why the town would not give us a suggestion, as it has done for every single case since I have joined this board? Why would it?
I was not directly involved in the mediation. I understand that was the agreement reached at the mediation conference. Perhaps Mr. Pritchard could be more detailed on that, but I believe that was the agreement.
Mr. Pritchard, I see you on the screen. Since Mr. Coltrane has referred to you in response to Dr. Ponder's question, if you would like to respond, you may do so at this time.
Well, Mr. Coltrane, as you're probably aware, the mediation rules prohibit me from discussing anything that took place within the context of the mediation. And that's the law. So I don't know that I can elaborate because I can't.
Sure, we understand.
Why there was mediation?
Well, there was ongoing litigation.
Still ongoing?
That depends.
Why was there litigation?
Well, if I may, Dr. Ponder, there is litigation between the applicant and the town that resulted in the mediation conference. And so what is before the board now is Mr. Scott's application for a variance. The particulars of the litigation are, I think Mr. Pritchard will agree, really not relevant to y'all's discussion today.
I would agree.
Okay, Dr. Ponder, I think we're back to you. Any other questions of Mr. Coltrane? Okay.
No, thank you.
Any other board members have questions of Mr. Coltrane?
This is Mr. Johnson. I have a question.
Sir. Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Coltrane, I understand the town is not going to take a position one way or the other, but that does not include us. Is that correct?
No, the board is not constrained by that. The board is to hear the application and exercise its function as normal.
Thank you. Understood.
Any other questions of board members? Hearing none, the applicant may proceed with their presentation. Again, there's a maximum of 20 minutes, subject to interruptions for questions. And Ms. Haley, again, will be our kind and gentle timekeeper. And I see Mr. Scott and Ms. Rospaldo. Am I saying that correctly?
That's Mr. Spalding, yes.
Yes, thank you. And Mr. Pritchard, I understand you're the attorney for the applicant, and you may proceed in however order y'all want to proceed with your presentation. So go ahead, please.
I presume each of you has the application and therefore the map plat of the property. Is that correct?
We have before us, sir, a document entitled Written Narrative explaining in detail the variance requested and how the criteria apply to the request. And that is of 2 pages. Then we have an attachment B, applicant site plans, plural, which appears to be consisting of 2 pages. That is what the board has been furnished. Is that what you want us to be looking at?
Yes, ma'am. I just want to make sure you had it.
Yes, sir, we do.
All right. This is an application for a variance at 15 Marshland Road, which is zoned MF Marshfront, and is located in the Corridor Overlay District. The required adjacent use buffer requires a type C buffer. The buffer can be either 15 feet with more vegetation or 25 feet with less vegetation, and 2 variances are being requested. I think it should be noted, however, that the use to which the property is being put is permitted under the zoning ordinance. So there's no use issues going on here. It just relates to the 2 buffers. The first variance is for an after-the-fact variance to place a food truck within the adjacent use buffer. The food truck and associated screening fence are currently located on the property line within 15 feet of the buffer. The required adjacent use setback is 30. The food truck and associated screening fence are currently located on the property line within 15 feet of the 30-foot setback. And the variance request in question is to request a 15-foot encroachment into the 30-foot setback, which is a pretty big setback. Second variance request in question is for an after-the-fact variance to allow the existing shed commissary, which is a legal non-conforming encroachment located in the property within the 15-foot use buffer, to be used for a non-conforming use, specifically for commercial food preparation and as a commissary. So the first issue, and you the board, I'm quite sure, having been a member of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals, there are basically 4 criteria that are applied. The first is the particular piece of property. There are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. So property in question is approximately 98 feet wide, is narrower than most of the properties in question around it, making the placement of the food truck on the property in the absence of a variance difficult, especially in light of the pre-existing wooden structure which is already located on the property, as the buffer leaves only 38 feet of usable area. Further, the shed commissary is a legal non-conforming encroachment. The use variance relating to the shed commissary will simply allow it to be used in a manner consistent with the remainder of the property. It should also be noted bear with me. There's something I highlighted that was sitting here. Oh, sorry. On this property is a wetland which requires a buffer and setback from it that bisects the middle of the property, which makes it a bit unusual. And there are also access easements on both sides of the property which require additional setback buffers from each. This, in and of itself, makes this an exceptional and extraordinary condition which pertains to this property and this property alone. Which leads me to the second conditions. These conditions do not generally apply to other properties in the vicinity. First off, this is one of the 3 smallest properties in the general area. Second, on several of the properties adjacent to the subject property are approximately the same width as the subject property, but there are no wetlands associated with associated buffers that exist on the other properties in the vicinity, and not all the other properties in the vicinity have easements on either side. So that's what makes this property different from all of its neighbors, which is really the driving test to the variance request. If you read the case law, these are if you meet these two criteria, unless there's something that really jumps out, that pretty much drives the variance test. But there are, in fact, two other requirements. Because of these conditions, the applications of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict, there's the key, unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. The application of this ordinance would unreasonably restrict it because the other properties around it don't suffer from this burden. This property is burdened by the wetland and the additional easements in addition to its relatively small size. So when you factor all that in, to not allow the encroachment into the buffers will unreasonably impact this property, which other properties can conform to the zoning without going into the buffers because of the fact they don't have these other topographical and legal restrictions, not to mention the small size of the lot, which impact it. So it's thus far it's pretty classic variance. The last one is the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to the adjacent property of the public good, and the character of the zoning district where the property is located will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. Well, first off, it has to be of substantial detriment. It can't be just of any old detriment because, I mean, the truth be told, even anything that falls within the zoning, even if you meet the zoning criteria, there's going to be some burden on the adjacent property. It doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter what you put there. But the question is, will it be of substantial detriment? It's got to be significant. It can't just be just a minimal burden. In the case law on that, the board really should identify the public interest at stake. What's the public interest in the buffer? Well, it's to buffer adjacent properties from what's going on the subject property. And I would submit to you the fact that absolutely no one has objected to this application is a pretty good indication that there is not a substantial detriment. If there was to be a substantial detriment, you could rest assured, and the board, I'm sure, has seen this over and over, there would be a neighbor out there complaining about this variance application. The fact that the adjacent neighbor is not complaining is pretty substantial proof that there is no substantial detriment to the adjoining property. And then second, the board should identify the detrimental effect that will ensue from the grant of the variance. Well, again, we know that going into the buffer does provide some detriment, but it's not substantial, and that's the key. I don't see any substantial detriment here. Your test also requests permitted use or land or structure that is not allowed in the applicable zoning district, as previously mentioned. It meets the use. Second, the physical extension of the non-conforming use. That's there is no non-conforming use per se on the property in question. Third, increase the density of the use above the permitted applicable zoning. Doesn't do that. And fourth, it doesn't have any impact on the sign regulations. So, in my experience, both as a lawyer who's taken many of these up into the courts and as a member of the zoning variance, this is a classic variance. It meets all of the criteria. It falls right in line. Courts have been consistent on this. Our board in Charleston has been pretty consistent on this, and I think this meets it. I don't know what else to say. If you got questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, thank you, sir. We'll go around for questions from the board members. This time, Mr. Johnson, you get first opportunity for questions.
I have no questions.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Fingerhut, questions from you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Pritchard, do you happen to have any photographs of the property, an aerial view that shows neighboring lots, or some visual representation other than the survey as to what it is that you're describing here?
I do. I thought that was in the record. I can load it up so you can look at it. That's what I was asking about from the get-go. You can give us a minute. We can put it on and you can take a look at it.
Sure.
I thought that was in the application packet, so, and, you know,
Yes.
we'll put it up so you can look at it, okay?
Okay, we did not receive that.
Will that also include sort of like a you know, the GIS map of the area showing
Yes.
this lot and other lot? I mean, it's very helpful to us to see things like that.
Yeah, and it'll show the property lines and the like.
I guess, I mean, while we're waiting for that to be loaded up, can I ask a couple of other questions?
Sure.
Great, thank you. Is there any way that the food truck and the fence could be moved somewhere else on the property where it will not be in the buffer or setback?
You know, given the wetland and the easement, that's going to be pretty difficult to do. That's what sort of sets this property aside from its neighbors, is it's got those constraints that the others don't have.
Understood, and not to be annoying, but I'm going to ask you the same question again. I'm going to ask whether it's difficult. Is it doable? Looking at the survey, to me, it looked doable, but I'm not. I don't know. I'm asking you.
I don't, honestly, I don't think so, but you know, I mean, without standing there on the property at this moment and playing around with it, that's kind of a difficult, I mean, you know, and then we're gonna have to get into the wetland issue and the easement issue, and I can't, at least I said here, probably not, but.
Okay, and I guess the last one, and it ties into your answer here, is that other than the pictures that are being loaded, are you planning on offering any evidence or testimony?
Well, I mean, the lot is what it is. I mean, it is 98 feet long. The wetland is there. Do you want something sworn under oath? I mean, I'm happy to provide something, but I've never seen that done in a zoning meeting before, and hundreds of them. I mean, if you want it, I can do it.
Well, no, it's not a question of what I want. Honestly, it's your application. I'm just asking because you're making certain factual assertions for which you have no direct knowledge. You've stated that. So I'm asking, are you going to offer anything from anybody who does? Or is this going to be it other than the pictures?
Ty, would you like to address that?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir, yes. Mr. Scott, go ahead.
I would actually like to share my screen, if possible.
Ms. Haley, can you assist with the sharing of Mr. Scott's screen? I know we're having photos loaded from Mr. Pritchard's office, so.
Okay, can you guys see that?
Not quite yet, sir. Hang on just one sec. Ms. Haley, are we able to share Mr. Scott's screen at this time?
Madam Chair, we are not able to share his screen from our end, but I'm happy to walk him through the process.
It says you're sharing your screen now.
There we are.
We see it. Yep, we see it.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. We can see it, Mr. Scott.
Okay. This is actually directly in reference to this application. There we have a letter here from the town of Hilton Head dated September 2nd, 2015. And as you can see highlighted here from the town, it states the wood screen fence surrounding the food truck and enclosed building encroach into the 30-foot adjacent use setback from lot 7. Though these building and fence enclosure would not have been permitted in the setback area if the building permit applications for these structures were submitted as part of a commercial development instead of a residential accessory structure. The building and fence enclosure do not have to be removed to bring the site into full compliance with the LMO. They are legally non-conforming structures. So we have a letter here coming directly from the town of Hilton Head Island acknowledging where these buildings sit, where the food truck sits, and where the screen sits as well. Second, we talk about existing non-permitted structure. As you all know, in order to get a business license from the town, various departments would have to sign off and basically check the boxes prior to a business license can be issued. I'm going to show you here. Here's a business license for Gullah Geechee Catering at 15 Marshland Road, within that same food truck surrounded by that screened-in enclosure. Again, an active business license, active since September 2015, stating a restaurant without alcohol. Third, I want to share is this, in particular, an email chain coming from the town of Hilton Head Islands, and Siren, carbon copied, Terry Lewis and Heather Collins, dated September 2015. Again, directly addressing what we are here for today. The adjacent use setback and buffer from Lot 7, LMO Section 16.5.102D, adjacent use setback requirements, and 16.5.103E, adjacent use buffers requirements. If you receive a variance from these sections for the setback and buffer requirements from Lot 7, you can place new structures such as food and merchandise display areas, seating areas, fences, etc. in the setback area, and you would not be required to create a landscape buffer along the property line you share with Lot 7. And as you can see highlighted, number one, the second highlighted section, as stated during this meeting, staff will support a variance from this requirement. So I just wanted to share that and just kind of give everybody an outline of where we are, how we got here, briefly without going into any particular details in regards to any mediation agreements or settlements, but we have actually records from the town in regards to their position on the remaining of the food truck where it sits.
May I continue to inquire? Actually, I have a couple of questions based upon that, Madam Chairman.
Sure, Mr. Fingard, go right ahead. And
Thank
I think we're still awaiting the loading of photographs, but I think you have questions of Mr. Scott. So
Sure.
Go ahead, Mr. Fingard.
Thanks very much. Referring to the September 2nd, 2015 letter that you showed a portion of, is it correct to say that within 24 hours of that letter, the town retracted that?
No, sir. We have never received anything in writing from the town at all.
By email or during a meeting or anything?
During a meeting. Actually, it was 3.5 years later when we received it, when the new assistant town manager, Josh Gruber, was hired for the town. When he was hired, he actually presented us a letter which was conflicting the original 2015 letter.
But you were not made aware through, I'm sorry if I just wasn't clear, you were not made aware of any concern about the statements in that letter right after it was made?
On April 25th, 2019, which is actually 2 years ago to yesterday, we've had town council members under oath and, well, not town council members, town officials under oath, basically being questioned by town council members about if we ever received that letter. There's no documentation of that letter. We have never received anything from the town. If it was a month, if it was 2 months, if it was a year or 2 years or 3 years. It was not until a new assistant town manager, deputy town manager, Josh Gruber, was hired, and that's when we actually received conflicting letters about removing the buildings and structures. We have never received anything in writing. We've had numerous attorneys request from the town to put it in writing, and throughout that 3.5 year time frame, we have never received anything in writing from the town to move it. Furthermore, when it comes down to the zoning there with the property, when the business licenses were issued at the time, there was an adjacent use of the next door neighbor was actually utilizing their property commercial as well. We have a mixed use zone within the property, and there was the neighbor was had a commercial use of advertising and selling of honey, wholesale and retail for his actual development next door. So that's what's been going on. But to answer your question, sir, no, we've never received anything from the town within a week or 2 weeks, a month or 2 months or 2 years. It wasn't until 3.5 years later.
Okay, but just to be clear though, I'm not necessarily talking about a letter. Anything, were you made aware by the town of anything having to do with that September 2nd letter that indicated perhaps you shouldn't rely on it?
No, not at all.
Okay, that's fine. I don't want to put words in your mouth. That's all. One other question.
And that business license was renewed continuously every year for 3.5 years. So if there was a issue with that building being there, my question would be, why was the license renewed?
Okay, and then with just the last thing, I guess, is with respect to the, because you mentioned that getting relief from the adjacent use setback some time ago. That was actually decided by the Board of Zoning Appeals, I think in 2016. Would that be correct?
I'm sorry, say that again?
The whole notion of waiving the setbacks based upon the relationship between your lot and one of your neighbor's lots, perhaps the argument was, I think, that they were acting together as a single development. You had appealed an adverse finding to the BZA. Actually, there were some members of this panel who I think were on that. But that appeal was denied. Is that correct?
That's 100% correct. And what was before the town at that time was to waive the buffers and setbacks so we could put additional items into the buffer and setback. What was actually before them had nothing to do with the current buildings and where they sit now. So if the waiver was granted, then at that time it would have allowed us to bring and put new additional structures in the buffer setback. Right. There was no order from the town or from the courts or anyone else requiring us to remove items from buffer setbacks. We relied on the first initial letter that we received from the town saying that these structures are legally non-conforming and don't have to be moved.
And how close is oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, please. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And we have stuck to that letter since then.
And how close is the food truck to the property line?
The food truck itself is probably about 6 feet, give or take, probably closer to 6 or 7. The actual fence there is 1.5 foot off the property line, and then the food truck is probably an additional 4 feet away from the fence. So you'll probably average about 6 feet from the actual property line. So nothing sits on the property line.
Right,
Yes,
right.
We need to correct that.
And how high is the screen fence that we're talking about around the food truck?
The screen fence around the food truck, based on Richard Spruce's letter that he sent to me, basically stated that if it was more than 8 or 8.5 feet or something like that, then that would require a permit. But that was never determined. And the screen fence was basically the screening facade rather was basically based on the town's pre-application meeting is what they would have preferred versus seeing a big metal food truck. Since then, as you know, the town has changed their ordinances now, and that screen will not be required, and food trucks can actually be on vacant lots as it stands right now. So we are way over what would be required in regards to accommodating the public. The town now allows vacant lots to have food trucks on them.
Right. And just one final question. Is there some place where the food truck and the screen fence, or maybe not the screen fence, can be relocated on your lot where it's outside of the setbacks and buffers?
It probably is a possibility, but it will disrupt the layout, the makeup of the property. And again, having that letter from the town basically stating that those particular structures are legally non-conforming and don't have to be moved, we have been advised to stick to that letter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scott. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
Mr. Fingerhut, I think that Mr. Pritchard was putting up some photographs and maybe some other documents for us. Mr. Pritchard, have you been able to upload those? And Ms. Haley, can the staff assist with that?
Send her to Missy. She has them.
Okay. Ms. Haley, can you or one of the other staff members, it looks like we're getting some things now. Mr. Pritchard, can you see what we're seeing?
Yes, I can. There's the property.
Okay. So perhaps you could go through these documents, and then we'll come back to Mr. Fingerhut to see if he has questions after seeing these documents. And we now see an aerial from the GIS, Marshland Road, showing outlined in red the lot in question. And that's the only document I'm seeing right now. If there's others that you want us to see,
There's 3 others, but yeah.
Okay. Let's go ahead. Ms. Haley, I'm not sure who is sharing the screen for us, but let's go ahead with the next document, please. We're now getting a gallery view of folks with no documents.
She found them, right? Yeah, there were 2 of them that showed up early on.
Yeah.
Yes. We saw some others that quickly disappeared.
Missy?
We'll see. Technology is great, but sometimes
it's wonderful when you're not using it.
Right. And you have to be patient sometimes. Ms. Haley, can you or one of the other staff members help us to see the other documents?
Madam Chair, this is Teresa. Missy, could you confirm the only document that I see in the folder is the site plan that I shared on the screen?
Well, we had the photograph, the aerial, but then the site plan disappeared instantly.
That's correct.
Teresa, there were 2 more files that were saved in the folder. So there should be 3.
Yes, they just came up. I see the other 2.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for helping us out, Ms. Haley. Sorry to keep calling your name.
That's all right. That's what I'm here for.
Okay. So, Mr. Pritchard, we're now seeing it's labeled Attachment C, Site Plans, plural. Is that one of the documents you want us to see?
Yeah, you see the wetland. Well, see the wetland right smack dab in the middle of it, and then you see the utility easements running through. And I mean, when you start adding that in, it really does compress this property more so than anybody else in the neighborhood, except maybe Lot 7. But the Lot 7 doesn't have the easements that we have, so even it's not as compressed as this one.
And I believe there is a third document that you wanted us to see, if we could see that now.
There you go. That shows the buffers and how once you get into it.
Yeah, there we go.
How narrow this property actually becomes once all of the buffers are applied to it.
Can we, I can zoom in on my screen. I was going to ask if we could see a closer up, but I'm able to zoom in on my screen. Mr. Fingerhut, I think we're to you with questions. I think you would ask for documents like this. Mr. Fingerhut, I think we'll go back to you with questions at this point.
Okay, thank you. So just looking actually at the picture that's on the screen, I mean, I can't control the screen, but looking at the picture that's on there, just going through it, the property line is in red on the right-hand side. What I'm seeing is at the top of the food truck with the screen fence around it on, I don't know if that's 2 or 3 sides. I can't tell for certain whether that's 2 or 3 sides. And it looks like that is fully in the buffer. I mean, it takes up most of the buffer, at least from what this looks like to me. My question, I guess, is this. Now, again, taking that fence and food truck, and just, it's a difficult exercise, but in your mind, and trying to move it, because it looks like you're looking at a sort of an L-shaped area of the permanent structures in the food truck. It seems to me that if it was moved to the other side, you would be within the buffers and setbacks and you would not, you wouldn't need us. It would actually work, and it would be in a similar sort of configuration, although sort of a mirror image of it, I guess. Is that a, so my question is that possible?
I'm gonna have to defer to Mr. Scott on this one. Ty?
Mr. Scott, can you hear did you hear the question, and can you see the outline that the board is looking at on your screen?
I can see the outline, yes. I'm sorry, Mr. Fingerhut, what was the question?
Well, just looking at the food truck and the screen fence that goes with it, it just seems to me from the image that if that were moved into, like, on the left side of the building, if you will, you would be behind the setbacks and buffers and have essentially the same configuration that you have now, just on the opposite side. I mean, is that a possibility?
That's the parking area you're referring to. That's parking. So you have an adjacent use setback from the other side, which will be lot number 9. Then you have a 20-foot access easement, and then you have parking lanes as well.
And it just doesn't. So you don't think there's any room there for the truck to be relocated? I mean, if you don't, I'm asking you what you think. I mean, that's.
I think that we have a letter saying that it doesn't need to be moved, yes.
And the question is can it? I mean, if you don't think it can be, explain why.
No, I don't think it can be, and because of the reasoning of the parking.
Okay. All right, and then just I guess lastly, going to the image of the area, the GIS image that you had up on the screen, and I don't know how easy it is for you to flip to that.
You can do that.
I think, Mr. Fingerhut, we have to wait for one of the town staff members to get us back to that GIS aerial outlining the lot. I see it coming up.
I think he's looking for the third. There it is.
That's the one, yeah. Thank you. Just as a person who isn't terribly good with the ruler, but looking at this, the size of this lot seems to be actually very similar to the lots in the vicinity, if not bigger.
Except that it doesn't. Those other lots are not burdened by those easements. That's what really singles this one out from lot 7 and lot 6, where adjacent is these other easements require additional buffering. That's what's changing the configuration of this lot as opposed to the other two.
So that's the. I mean, I guess that's the use that requires the easement. But just looking at it from the next door neighbor's lot, number 13, right to the right of the lot that's outlined. It seems that's, if not the same size, perhaps even a little bit smaller. And then to the lot to the left, same thing. I mean, it seems to be substantially smaller. I'm just trying, I'm just looking at the same test that you are, and I'm trying to understand.
The other two don't have the access easements that this one is burdened by. That's what's changing this lot as opposed to the other two, the access easements.
And the access easement is for what purpose?
To allow access to the back of the property. The other properties that don't have frontage on the, when the lot was created, the access easements were created.
Right. The whole property is owned by Mr. Scott, though, right?
Not the ones all the way through.
No, I'm looking in just the outlined in red. I'm just talking about that.
Yeah, but what I'm telling you is there's an access easement down the side of this that allows these properties access.
Right.
These properties aren't burdened by that, and that changes the configuration and buffer of the lot. See.
Okay, understood. Actually, that's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have no further questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Let's see, I think we're to Mr. Walczak. Questions of you, Mr. Walczak.
Yeah, it's just a couple of small ones. We're talking about the easement that goes down the side of the property line to access the lots closer to the marsh. But yet the other lots, from what I saw on that aerial, do have that one especially next to it has roadway access to Marshland Road. So why is there a need for that easement if that adjacent lot, has its own access?
Well, it may or may not have a road, but it's not an easement of right. And there's a big difference.
Easement of right?
In other words, it is a legal easement, and this is a subservient property to the dominant properties. That's not necessarily the case for those other properties. Even though it may allow an access road, it doesn't have to. And that's the difference.
So in other words, there's no opportunity to say have the easement removed.
Yes.
You can't do that. Is that it?
No, that's right. It's a legal right.
Can't that legal right be
belongs to the dominant
rescinded?
property?
Couldn't it be rescinded?
Not unilaterally.
Okay, so no attempt has been made to at least get rid of it then.
Well, I mean, unless the people behind want to give it up. Well, I mean, it's like your next door neighbor. I mean, they'll let you build on their property if you let them, but I mean, you don't have a right to just do it.
All right. Well, can you put that thing back up? Put the aerial back up so we can see which lots we're talking about that need that easement. Sure. I just want to see. Like I say, it may not be a possibility, but which lots actually need that easement?
The ones that are closest to the marsh.
Those I see 3.
Keep going down. There you go.
Uh-huh.
You see the road coming through. That's a platted easement. And if you show the site plan, it shows it on there.
Okay.
There you go. See it?
Yeah, I see that. Right. Seems to meander onto lot 9. Okay. Last question here for me. I mean, it's just a curiosity question. I heard the word commissary used. I know what that is, but what type of facility is that? Are you going to sell food to? That says, I mean, basically a commissary means it's where you can buy wares, at a military facility or at a prison, or that's what a commissary is. So what's that mean, commissary?
Or a canteen. But you go ahead, Ty.
Yes, based on South Carolina DHEC regulations, in order to have a food truck, you would have to have a what they call commissary or a restaurant, which is required to where you would report back to on a daily. So in order to get our DHEC approvals for our food truck, we had to have that quote unquote commissary that had to be approved from the state along with the food truck in order to get the business licenses that the town initially issued. So they say commissary, but it can be actually be a restaurant. But it's pretty much a prep area.
So where is this commissary?
The commissary is the building. If you pull back up the survey there on the plat. So where it says wetlands buffer, wetlands setback? Okay, well yeah, let's utilize this. If we could zoom in a little bit, I'm not sure if you can zoom in.
No, I really can't.
Okay. Yeah. So here it is, where it says Lot 8, wood screen fence, where you see right next to it says 1-story structure.
Yep.
That's the commissary, and then with a covered deck attached to it. So the
all right.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's the facility that gets inspected by DHEC?
That along with the food truck, yes, sir. And those were the requirements in order for the town to initially issue the business license.
Okay, so it's a place where you cook the food.
It's actually just a prep. All the cooking actually takes place inside of the
in the truck.
Inside of the food truck. It's a prep. Yeah.
Just to clarify, thank you.
Yes, sir.
No more questions.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Ms. Loudermilk, questions from you?
Yes, while the site plan is up, now that some of this is kind of coming together, where is the food truck as we look at this site plan?
The food truck is located where it says wood screen fence. It's located right in that area there. So the screen fence is the facade around the food truck. And I thought we had a picture of the facility. If I was to share my screen, I think I could actually give everybody let's see here.
Yeah, I think the staff is, town staff, I think that Mr. Scott wants to share his screen now. So if we could accommodate that.
Yes, absolutely. This is Teresa. I stopped sharing my screen, so Mr. Scott may share his now.
Thank you, ma'am.
Let's, actually my screen saver, so let's see. I close everything out. Okay, so can you see that?
Yes, sir. We do see a photograph of.
Okay. So you can see the window to the screen, the window that's attached to the screen. So the food truck, that's the window to the food truck. The red building is the commissary, along with the deck.
Yeah. How many parking spaces does the parking lot accommodate?
Currently there's 10.
Okay. How many spaces are required for this type of business? Is there a town requirement here?
The town has approved us to have up to 10 food trucks. So they required one food truck, one parking space per food truck. So we are approved to have up to 10 from the town, based on the 10 parking spaces.
Although the lot back to the lot would not accommodate 10 food trucks.
Well, based on the open space that's available and leaving every other parking space available, yes, we could if we wanted to, we could. Yes, based on staff approval.
Where would you place the other food trucks?
In every other parking space, and then also within the open space area, and then based on the staff support of the variance along the property line over there as well.
Okay.
And all of that's in writing from the town.
Mr. Scott, this is John White. Is there space on the other side of the wetlands?
No, there's a residential structure there.
Is that your property?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But is there enough room to get to the other side? You know, if you take the easement, the ingress and egress easement out, there still appears to be enough room.
I'm not following you.
Is that how you get to the other side? In that space?
Yes, down the easement, and also the parcels in the back utilizes that easement as well.
Okay, all right.
I think we're back to Ms. Loudermilk for questions. Ms. Loudermilk, do you have additional questions?
Yeah, just the adjacent neighbor, and without the site plan being up there, but the neighboring property that backs directly up to the food truck and fence. Have they endorsed this variance? Have they submitted objections to the variance? What is their position on this?
Well, when they recently purchased the property and they knew of the ongoing issues that we had with the town, and they have been pretty much supportive of what we have been doing. They haven't opposed the development, the establishment, and they're actually honestly looking to potentially do something commercial as well, is what I'm being told. So they're definitely in support of it.
Okay. But is there anything from them on record supporting or objecting?
Certainly
No.
they didn't lodge an objection because you've got the record for you and there are no objections to this project at all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Dr. Ponder, questions from you?
Yes. One of the things that I was going to ask you was, what are your plans for the property? And so I think what I hear you saying is that you intend to have as many as 10 food trucks on the property? 10
No.
additional, or a total of 10?
No, actually, the site is for, actually, we already have secured our food truck with at least one more, but we're working with local vendors to bring in a farmer's market, local vendors to do like artwork, sweetgrass basket makers. So basically an outdoor sales area that caters to the public. Even though we are approved to have that many food trucks, the intent is not to have that many food trucks, but also to open up the farmers market and open air sales for other small vendors as well.
And of any of these other businesses that might come in, would they require structures of any kind or just be at tables, open air?
Pop up, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
There would be tents, pop-up tents that would come in and pop up for selling their products and kind of do a rotation with other vendors as well. We've gotten the town has actually approved the sign out there on the property, so it actually says food truck vendors and farmers market. So we're getting a lot of calls through the Facebook Beautiful Island Facebook page for people looking for places to come and set up the open air sales, the farmers market, and in actuality, I mean, we're just doing a lot of things to help other small businesses.
The food trucks, if I might add, really are ancillary to the bigger overall project. It provides food for the people that are actually participating in the farmers market, participating in the arts and crafts. Basically the customers can come in, and that's why it's food trucks and not a permanent restaurant.
And of these other structures, or of these other vendors, or anything that you might bring onto the property, how many, if any, of them would also encroach on the buffer for their positioning? Where would they go? Would they also encroach on the buffer? Would you be able to use, would it be buffer space that you'd be using if you got the variance?
Yes, we will utilize the existing buffer and setback.
So there would be others in this same encroachment space?
Yes.
Is everything, it's currently operational, right? The food truck and everything else?
Everything has been approved, licensed up until, like I said, April of 2015, April of 2019. 2 years ago was when town council actually revoked the business licenses and denied the approval of any other business licenses on file.
Okay, I'm really trying to focus myself on the criteria that we're allowed to use to grant a variance. So I want to go back to the extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to this particular piece of property. You're saying that the particular piece of property is smaller than others around it. Is that correct?
Yeah, particularly when you add in the easement and the Particularly when you have the easements, because you can't block an easement.
Okay, and also, are you suggesting that the marshland, the wetlands, also add to this?
Sir, yes, it does. Now, the other two are also somewhat burdened by the wetland, but they're not also burdened by the easement.
Okay. When was the last?
But if you look at the overall,
when was the last time the Army Corps of Engineers or anybody looked to make an assessment as to where those wetlands actually are? Because it changes.
Less than 6 months. I mean, they just flagged the buffers.
They just did it? Okay.
Yeah, they're new out there, yeah.
Okay. So basically you're saying that the real differentiator here are the easements.
On both sides, yes.
On both sides. That you're just locked into, nothing you can do about that.
Yeah, that's what makes us different.
Don't those easements also apply to the properties on the other sides of them, though?
Not necessarily, and also the property to the immediate.
I'm saying
is much bigger, and it doesn't have the wetland.
But don't they apply to the other sides? I'm trying to figure out what the true differentiators here are.
Let's pull the map, one of the aerials back up, please.
Let's see. I think Ms. Haley, that'd be back to the town staff. Thank you.
Right. How about the other one's probably a little better? The other aerial. There we go. I mean, it does to a point, but it doesn't have an easement on both sides, whereas this one does, and that is a bigger lot when you get down to it, and it doesn't have the wetland that cuts all the way across, because it sort of stops at the edge of the property, well, right at the east. Right. The reason that access easement was put there, because it was just to the other side of where the marsh stops, so it doesn't have any of that.
Can you point to where this is? I mean, you're talking, but I don't actually know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Where you're talking about.
All right, so you've got the red line, and you've got the access easement running down. I guess this would be let's see how to describe it. If you're coming off of Marshland Road, moving towards the marsh, down the red property line, kind of where the parking is, that's where the access easement is, okay? But if you look at the marsh, it stops right at the edge of the access easement. So the property to the immediate other side, which, yes, it does have some aspects of this easement, it doesn't have the marsh encroaching down the middle of it.
Yeah.
So that's a big differentiator.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think I have any other.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ponder. Mr. White, you had some questions earlier, but it's your turn now to ask any additional questions.
I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Okay. So that leaves it to the chair as the last board member to ask questions. If you could, staff, pull back up the survey showing the various easements on it. Yes, thank you. That's the one. Either Mr. Pritchard or Mr. Scott, whoever can address this question. I see on the upper boundary, the one shared with Lot 9, a 20-foot ingress, egress, and utility easement that runs all the way down this property. And then I see on the Marshland Road side, it appears to be a 40-foot, 70-degree angle adjacent street setback.
Correct.
And then on the boundary that's shared with Lot 7, I see two different dotted lines where the designation Lot 8 is. The first one is a 15-foot adjacent use buffer, and in addition, a 30-foot adjacent use setback.
Correct.
I understand the 20-foot ingress, egress, and utility easement, and I understand the purpose for that. And I should disclose, my husband and I ride our bikes a lot. We've ridden up and down Marshland Road many times, and I know where this property is. I've not frequented the food truck at all, but I have parked in the gravel parking area once to look at the property. So I'm somewhat familiar with it. My question for you is, I do not understand why there is a 30-foot adjacent use setback just in that portion of the property where the designation lot 8 is. Is that an LMO requirement? Is that some sort of subdivision requirement from the recorded plat?
I believe it's an LMO. I believe it's an LMO.
Okay. It seems to be quite odd that it's just in that one location.
Yeah.
But
Excuse me, this is Tyler Newman.
yes, sir.
The 30-foot setback would be an adjacent use setback that's based off from the, I believe, classification of eating establishment for this adjacent to a single family residential use on what's shown as lot 7.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to.
Okay. And I understood the testimony that there was a commercial use on that property. I apologize, Mr. Scott, I can't remember, something about printing and beekeeping.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so there was some sort of commercial use in addition to residential use on lot 7 previously. Okay.
Yes.
Madam Chairman, if you look
yes,
at
sir.
that additional use setback, and then you look at the 40-foot setback, and then you look at the marsh, and then you look at the utility easement, it's a pretty small envelope.
Yes, sir, and I think the other, if the staff could pull back up the aerial, which has the red line, the yellow line, and the green line, that shows the limited area.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know what to call it other than that. Yes, that's the one. So it appears as though from this document that the only use area, if you will, is within the yellow lines. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And probably a good portion of that is used by parking space. And there have been some questions and responses about required parking spaces. But it appears as though where it says wetland setback, that where the word setback is, there's an existing structure there. I think that's the, if I remember from the photograph, the deck area. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Well.
Okay. All right. So if you take out that plus whatever parking may be required, and I think we still have some question about what may be required, then you're even more limited as to the space which could be used. Is that accurate?
Correct. And,
okay.
and let's think back to a minute ago where Mr. Scott was talking about putting pop-up tents for the market. Look at those cars. You almost can't even get the pop-up tents in that little, if you think about a pop-up tent relative to the size of a car, you almost can't even get that in the envelope.
Within that grassy area or including?
Yeah, that's pretty tight. I mean, I don't think you're going to find many lots that are this burdened.
Okay. And Mr. Scott showed us a photograph of the area with windows from what I understand to be a food truck. And that, Mr. Scott, has that food truck been there since 2015? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Licensed and permitted. Okay.
All right. And does that food truck come and go as some food trucks do, or has it been stationary?
No, that has been stationary from day one. When I approached the town, the intent was never to move around Hilton Head. And based on the town's testimony, this site is the first site on Hilton Head which allowed and permitted a food truck, licensed and permitted a food truck.
Okay. And would any other food trucks come and go from the parking area? Is that what you told us before?
Yes. There's the space in the front that we actually, the town up until 2019, where the town licensed and permitted another food truck to be out there as well, and they allowed them to be out on site in that area just outside of the 40-foot buffer from Marshland Road. So that was a food truck that the town had also allowed to be out there.
Okay. And then, Mr. Pritchard, I don't know whether you're the one to address this question, but from Marshland Road, there's, as best I can read this, a 40-foot, 70-degree angle adjacent street setback. Can you explain to me what that is?
It's a required setback, as I understand it.
Yes, with the town's overlay that we're in the corridor. So that would be required a 40-foot buffer setback from Marshland Road with whatever required landscape, which is already out there as well. We have more than enough landscape.
So that's the zoning ordinance which imposes that.
Okay, all right. I wasn't sure whether that had anything to do with the road right of way, so, okay. And in that same site plan I'm looking at, I guess it's a survey, shows an existing manufactured home on the other side of the tidal pond or wetland area. And how long has that manufactured home been there?
Probably since 2013, 2012, 2013.
Okay, all right. Those are the questions that I have. Any other questions from board members at this time?
This is Bob Johnson. I have two questions.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Okay. Mr. Scott, for clarification, you've been closed down for 2 years. Is that correct?
No, sir. I've been in and out of court for 2 years.
but have you been serving from your?
Yes, sir. Yes,
okay.
sir. Go ahead.
Okay, that's fine. The other question is, as I understand it, the 15 and 30-foot setbacks, if there's commercial on that side, it will be 15 feet. But if it's residential, it's going to be 30 feet. Is that correct? On the food truck side, there's two different setbacks. One says
that's our understanding of it, of the ordinance.
Okay.
There's currently the house there is currently technically residential. Isn't that correct, Ty?
Yes. Again, we're going back to the previous owner was a mixed use, which is still within the marshfront mixed use. But I believe if it's residential to residential, I think there's only a 5-foot setback, but 30-foot between residential and commercial. If that answers
right
the
now,
question.
that property, as I understand it, is considered a residential use.
Yes.
Currently. It could be commercial.
Correct.
And if it's commercial, you'll have a 15-foot setback.
No, if it's commercial, and we have a shared access easement based on the town's LMO. They will be considered what it was, Mr. Fingerhut, he mentioned it earlier. Developments that function
operating
together.
as a single development.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
We have a shared access easement. So if their use changes to development, then there's no setback for both of us
whatsoever, so that you wouldn't be out of compliance with your food truck even.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Scott.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I had a couple of other questions that I'd like to ask.
Sure.
But this is the thing. I know the town isn't taking a position on this, but I also know that they're here. And I'd like to ask a couple of questions of a member of town staff. I'm not sure who it should be. My guess is it's Terry Lewis, but I'm not sure. On just a couple of fact issues that I'd like to get some clarity on. So I'm asking you because I don't know how to go about that really.
I think Mr. Fingerhut, if you'll ask your question, and then I don't know whether Mr. Coltrane or Ms. Bush is still here to see if there's or Mr. Pritchard to see if there's any objection to staff responding to your questions. But I guess go ahead and ask them, and then we'll find out if they can answer and who will. I think that's the right way to go. So go ahead and ask your questions.
Fair enough. My question pertains to the September 2nd, 2015 letter that Mr. Scott mentioned. And I asked several follow-up questions about that. I'd like to understand, number one, who wrote the letter, number two, what it had to do with, and number three, whether or not it was ever retracted by the staff. And I think that's for Terry Lewis, but forgive me, I may not be right about that. But I would like to have somebody speak to that.
Curtis was pretty involved, as I understand it. Curtis, maybe you ought to take a stab at that.
I wasn't really asking Mr. Coltrane about that. I want to know from somebody who's familiar with the letter.
Just to respond, though, actually, I was not. I had some previous involvement in this case as a mediator. which has kept me out of the ongoing matter as it has moved forward. So actually, I do not know.
Okay. Perhaps, Mr. Scott, I think you put that letter up for us, and I would ask Ms. Haley if it's possible to allow Mr. Scott to share his screen to show that letter again, so we can refresh our recollection about the letter Mr. Fingerhut is asking about. And then, Mr. Coltrane, or if you're conflicted out due to being a mediator, if Ms. Bush is available to find out if staff can respond to Mr. Fingerhut's question.
Just so we're clear, yeah, I was asked to make the opening statement, but I cannot have any involvement in the substance of the discussion.
Sure, sure. Yeah, once you disclose you're a mediator. Ms. Bush, are you available?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Did you hear Mr. Fingerhut's question? And if so, can a member of the staff respond?
If his question is to more of a general nature rather than looking for a recommendation, because of the pending mediation, we're trying not to meddle with any of that and just to stay out of it entirely. But if it's a question that is of a general nature, yes, ma'am.
Well, if I may, it's not a general question at all, but it is a fact question. I'm not asking for anybody's opinion. I'm looking for facts, and I think that there are people in this meeting who have relevant information that I would like them to share. I'm not going to ask them what they think about the application because that's not on the table here. Everybody's neutral on the application. But as to what has occurred and what's been said, there is only one correct answer to those things. And I think there are people at this meeting who know that.
Well, I can tell you I'm not one of them. I wasn't here.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
That's fair enough.
Thank you, sir.
And
I'm not sure what relevance anything that was or wasn't decided previous to this hearing should have on your decision of as to whether or not the 4 criteria apply or that they don't. And the application fails or passes. But if the question is of an entirely factual nature rather than what happened in the past, then I would say absolutely staff could answer.
Thank you. Actually, yeah, I mean, it is, and it is relevant because Mr. Scott brought it up. And Mr. Scott's testimony has informed us that the town has given him permission to do exactly what he did and has somehow tried to take it back. And like I said, there are people in this meeting, I'm looking at their initials on my screen, who I think will have something to say about that and will know firsthand those details. I do not know them. I wasn't involved in those things. And I don't recall who the signature on the letter was. It might have been Terry Lewis, but I'm not certain. But it's again, it would seem to me somebody in town staff can speak to this.
And I wouldn't disagree with you, sir, that they could, but because this is in the midst of pending litigation, and as Mr. Pritchard said, he's not in a position to disclose what the outcome of that mediation is, and I don't know. So it was between Mr. Scott and the town, and the outcome was the issue would come back to you without any interference from anybody, and that's what we're trying to do. So my feeling is that if we're digging into, despite that Mr. Scott brought it up, that it's not appropriate for the town staff to comment on it, in as much as we are trying to not interfere in any way with this proceeding, other than here in a support capacity.
Understood, but not interfering is not the same thing as not being available for testimony. May I just call somebody from the town staff to be a witness, Madam Chair?
Let me check the rules. I recall that we can subpoena witnesses, so let me check.
Fortunately for us, they're already here.
True. You're right. We don't have to subpoena them.
No, on a zoning board meeting via Zoom.
I think it would be helpful for us to see that letter that we're talking about. If we could have that screen shared again somehow. And Ms. Bush, since the board does have authority to call witnesses, can we go ahead and call a witness? And then they can decide whether or not they can address questions.
If the board has determined that it has the authority to call witnesses, the witnesses are available. I'm not going to direct someone not to testify. However, as I said, we are attempting to remain neutral because this is a matter that's in a pending litigation status. It's not completed, which puts us in a very difficult spot.
I understand
Isn't
that.
the letter that David is referring to public record?
Yes.
Yes.
Forgive me. I know you weren't directing it to me, but it is a public record.
Yeah, so what's the problem?
Yes, let's pull that, if I could ask staff to let Mr. Scott share his screen so we can see that letter. And let's hold on for just a second till we can do that.
Madam Chair, this is Teresa. Mr. Scott can share a screen at any time.
Okay. Mr. Scott, can you go ahead and show us that letter, please, sir?
Okay. One second. This letter came from Ann. I'll start from the beginning.
Yes, sir. I think that'd be helpful.
Here it is, September 2015.
Mr. Fingerhut, is that the letter you're asking about?
Yeah, it's the one that Mr. Scott had mentioned where he says the town said that he could do what he's done, and I'm just trying to see who wrote the letter.
Okay. Here it is. So you have Ann Siren, copied Heather Collins and Terry Lewis.
Okay. Is Ann Siren present? Ann Siren, are you present at this meeting?
Ann is not present today.
Mr. Fingerhut, back to you.
Okay, that'll be fine then. Then if I could ask Terry Lewis a couple of questions about this, it would be very helpful.
I'm going to object to anybody other than the author of the letter testifying.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, I'm going to object to anyone other than the author of the letter testifying under Rule 801. It's hearsay.
Well, it depends what I ask, right?
Well, yeah, we'll see. Okay.
Mr. Fingerhut, let's go ahead and have you ask a question, and then the chair will do her best to determine whether or not. Then I'll listen if there's any objection.
Thank you. Ms. Lewis, are you here?
Terry Lewis, are you present for this meeting?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead, Mr. Fingerhut.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lewis, in part of the applicant's presentation here, he brought up a September 2nd, 2015 letter that he characterizes basically giving him permission to develop the site the way he has. And I had asked him whether or not the town had, subsequent to that letter, ever communicated to him that some of the information in that letter was not correct. And I'd like to know whether, first, do you know anything about that?
First, I would object to the characterization of the letter as not being correct, and you can answer the question.
Go ahead, Ms. Lewis, and answer the question.
Can you clarify the question? Are you asking if what's in the letter? I'm not certain what you're asking. And I apologize, you can't see me. I have my camera on. I'm sure.
That's okay. That's fine. That's okay. What I'm asking is whether the substance of that letter, subsequent to the letter, was communicated to Mr. Scott as being erroneous.
Is there any objection to that question? Hearing none, Ms. Lewis, please respond if you can.
I'm objecting to the characterization of it being erroneous, but she can answer the question.
Ms. Lewis, you may address the question if you can.
Yes, I don't know that I can answer that question. I apologize.
Well, then looking at the letter itself, is that an accurate statement of the town's position on the matters stated in the letter?
Any objection to the question?
Well, I'm going to object to anybody other than the person who wrote the letter testifying whether or not that's a correct position of the town's position. I think only the author can answer that question.
If I may, I think that's getting to the very heart of the issue, in essence, asking Ms. Lewis to offer an opinion, which is what I've directed staff not to do.
No, I could agree completely. I'm looking for a fact. If Ms. Lewis is aware of the fact that any portion of that letter was retracted, or is that an accurate statement of the town's position? If she's aware, if she's not aware of it, she could say so. But I don't want her to give an opinion. I respect that. I understand what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
I think she can. If she was involved in a retraction, I think she can tell you that. Otherwise, I don't think she can answer any of those questions.
Okay, Ms. Lewis, were you involved in a retraction of that letter?
I am not aware that we wrote a formal retraction of that letter.
Wasn't asking about a formal retraction. I had that with Mr. Scott too, but a retraction nonetheless. Not necessarily a written retraction. With were you involved in meetings subsequent to this, where the substance of this was brought up?
And I think, Mr. Fingerhut, your question is accepting therefrom any mediation discussions.
100%. I'm referring to what happened in September 2015.
Yes, sir. Ms. Lewis, if you can respond.
I can't respond. I'm sorry.
Okay, so is your answer you don't know? Or your answer, forgive me, is your answer you don't know? Or your answer is that you are not going to answer this question?
No, my answer is I don't know.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's fine. Is there somebody at this meeting who does know?
I think it's an open question for staff. I don't know what staff we have available for us, but to try to do this as expeditiously, but yet as fairly and without prejudice as possible. Is there any staff member who might be able to provide information to respond to Mr. Fingerhut's question? And if there's any objection from either Ms. Bush or Mr. Pritchard, please let us know. Mr. Fingerhut, I'm sorry. I hear someone trying to speak. Can you identify yourself, please?
Yeah, this is Edward Pritchard. I'm just, I think we first have to find out if anybody can even answer the question. If not, then it's irrelevant.
Well, I'm asking if there's any member of staff here who can address Mr. Fingerhut's question.
Not at this time.
Okay, that's Mr. Newman, as I understand.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any other town staff member wish to or able to respond? May not wish, but able to respond. Mr. Fingerhut, I don't know how else we could address your question at this time, unless you have other, follow-up question that could help out.
Well, I do, but frankly, if I can't start here, it's difficult to do that. So it's unfortunate, but that's we'll go with the record we have. So thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. The only other option available to us would be to continue the matter and to subpoena a witness. Mr. Fingerhut, do you desire to make that request?
I don't want to do anything to delay this matter, and I don't want to compel anybody who doesn't want to assist us in sort of getting to the bottom of things. So that's for me. If certainly anybody else wants to make a motion for that, I would be happy to support it, but I'm not going to do that. But thank you for the question.
Okay, sure. Let's see. We were, I think following up on any other board questions or discussion.
Yeah, this is Lisa Laudermilk.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to circle back, and I'm not even sure to whom I'm directing the question, but as we continued to discuss easements and setbacks and the site plan, et cetera, I wanted to make sure that I understood something. The use of the adjacent property at any given time, i.e. residential or commercial, that the use will affect and or determine the setback of Mr. Scott's property. Am I understanding that correctly?
This is Tyler Newman. Yes, ma'am, that is correct. The town has adjacent use setbacks and adjacent street setbacks. So the adjacent use setbacks are based on the use of the adjacent property, and if that use were to change and a future development plan submittal were to come in for either property, the setbacks are based off from the uses at that time.
Okay, and the zoning of this property would permit commercial or residential use. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other board questions?
Yeah, I have one more of Mr. Scott, if
Yes,
it's
sir,
okay.
Mr. Walczak.
The lot directly adjacent to the food truck. Do you own that, or is that someone else's ownership?
Someone else's ownership.
Someone else?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And Mr. Scott, that is the property which has changed over time from commercial to residential.
Exactly. It was a mixed use, just as ours is. We have residential in the back and commercial in the front.
Right.
And they had a mixed use that they were utilizing half of their property as residential and the other shed that's inside the same commercial buffer, 30-foot setback, or yes, it was a mixed use.
Okay, all righty. Thank you. Thanks.
Any other board member questions? Any other evidence from the applicant? Mr. Pritchard, any other evidence or any, there's not technically a rebuttal, but we're giving you an opportunity to speak again on this matter.
You know, I did really nothing additional to add. I think we've sort of fleshed it out as best as it can be fleshed out. I just think when you look at that yellow envelope, it's the classic variance. It's what the variances are for, and that's why they were created. That's why they're here. And I think this property, it meets the test straight on down the line. I don't think there's any real contention to the contrary. And I think the fact that nobody's objected is certainly evidence to that effect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. And I guess you're representing Mr. Scott, unless you want to offer Mr. Scott any other opportunity. I mean, we try to be as open and as fair as possible in this process. I don't want to make anyone say anything else, but I want to offer that opportunity.
No,
Okay.
I don't have anything else to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. At this time then, I'll ask about public comment. Ms. Haley, can you confirm if we received any public comment or if there are any callers who wish to make comment during the public hearing before we incorporate the evidence and close the public hearing?
Madam Chair, we received no written public comments and we do not have any callers on the line for this variance application.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. At this time, I'll note that we'll incorporate all of the evidence, including the documents that we received as part of the board package, and also the documents offered into evidence during this hearing, as well as the testimony during this hearing into the record. Any objections to that? Hearing none, all of that evidence is incorporated, and I will close the public hearing on this matter. Now we turn to board discussion, and I would point out that the board has been furnished with our template for variance matters. In this case, we don't have a staff report. We do have some proposed language from the applicant. We would, in order to make a motion, there would need to be more specific language used by use of that template for variance. And because of sometimes the time to craft language for that, if at any time someone wants to make a motion but needs some time to put together thoughts, then we can go into a brief recess. During that time, there would be no discussion amongst board members because that would be a part of the public meeting. But if someone would want to make a motion and has language prepared, then we would end our recess and come back into that part of the public meeting. And hopefully that's as clear as mud. If not, I'll try again to try to help through the process. But I think at this time, we'll look to board discussion and go again down the roll again in a rotating order. And Dr. Ponder, guess what? Your name's up first this time. And I will say to board members, as I've said before, if your name comes up in any order, including first, and you want to defer, you're welcome to do that. Just let me know. But Dr. Ponder, your name is up first this time.
Yeah, I spoke first last time for the last case, so I
Did
was
you?
rather shocked. I did.
I apologize. I'm just looking at my little sheet here that's helpful to me. I apologize. Well, Mr. White, your name is next in the order.
All righty. I guess it's pretty clear that this property is unique with the easements and the wetlands, and clearly is unreasonably restricted. And I, like everybody else, am very troubled by the 2015 letter.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Johnson, according to my list, you would be next in the order to comment.
I'm going to defer for right now.
Okay. Mr. Fingerhut, your name is up next in my list.
Okay, thank you. This is a difficult application because I do think the lot is unique. I do think there are interesting challenges for this lot that are, certainly exceptional. I'm not sure for Marshland Road how extraordinary they are, but they're certainly exceptional. So my sense is that this would qualify under the first criterion. I'm not certain about the next one, that there aren't wetlands or tidal bodies of water in other of the neighboring properties. In fact, it looks like it's in the next door neighbor's property. So I'm not sure that it doesn't generally apply to other properties in the vicinity. But my biggest concern on this is that it appears to me that there's another way to do this that would require either no variance or a minimal variance. And I'm not hearing a reason that it isn't being done or even attempted. So I'm not sure how we get past criterion 3. And honestly, as to criterion 4, to me, I mean, anything like this on commercial next to residential, so close to a property line, is antithetical to the whole zoning regime on Hilton Head. I mean, the point is to have space, light, and air between properties, particularly between residential and commercial. While we don't have anybody in opposition, it's just as it's laid out on the property itself, it seems to be in opposition to the LMO. I have a difficulty with that. So for me, those are my issues. Although yes, this is a unique property with some challenges. I'm not inclined for myself to support a variance.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Walczak, discussion from you.
Yeah, just one point that I think was one of the major issues brought up by David. That letter of 2015. It seems to be we don't have a clear answer on what happened, and I'm wondering if maybe we should, and as much as I'd like to get this over with, maybe defer and get some more information about that before any decision is made. It seems, with the secrecy involved because of litigation and mediation and all that, I just think there's something we're not getting, and maybe we should try to get it. That's my lay comment. I'm not a lawyer.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. Ms. Loudermilk, to you.
I definitely think the property is unique and has some unique, conditions. To me, it's the combination of all of them that feed into the situation. You've got the wetlands, you've got the 2 access easements on either side, and then to top it off, due to the nature of the zoning, the use of the adjacent property can and probably will vary from time to time, which the use at any given time affects the setback on the subject property. So I think you put all those 3 items together, and I think you've got definitely unusual, exceptional conditions, that those 3 issues would not apply to other properties. So I truly feel that way. I do have a little concern, and I guess this could be a condition, that if we approve a variance based on the current scenario, that the property would, if I understand correctly, would have the potential of being over improved and have even more violations on the setbacks and such. I'd hate to give a variance approval and again, have the subject property just be truly over improved and overutilized. I think that would make a questionable situation far worse. So in my mind, any variance should have a condition, and I'm not sure how we would word that at this point, but a condition on future, capacity, future usage. I too think that more information on the September 2015 letter would be really useful. I think we are all still a little bit in the dark as to all of the facts.
Okay.
Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Ponder, we're now to you.
I do think, frankly, that there are extraordinary and exceptional circumstances pertaining to this piece of property. I think the easements less so in my mind, and the wetland issue more so in my mind, because I think when it comes to number 2 of our criterion 2, do these conditions apply generally, or not to other properties? I think in this particular case, wetlands by their very nature don't apply equivalently. So I think where there's probably wetland in properties to the left, to the right, in front, behind, whatever. They don't apply equivalently. They almost can't because it's a natural phenomenon. And so I do think, once again, it's exceptional. On point 3, I think that these conditions do restrict his use of the property. So I'd be inclined to go there as well. And with regard to number 4, I think we haven't heard anything. I haven't heard anything that makes me think that issuing this variance would be a detriment to other properties around. I think that we come upon some cases where you say, my God, if we approve this variance, it's going to be a domino effect. Because there are so many pieces of property or so many homes exactly the same right in a row, and they're going to fall like dominoes just as soon as we do this. I don't think that's the case here. I don't think we'll have somebody else coming to us and saying, my circumstances are exactly the same as that case, and therefore there's precedent, and you need to give me the variance also. I'm inclined to think that's not going to happen. And I think as strange as this case is, and in my now, I want to say almost 2 years on this board, this is the strangest case I've ever come across, and not having people from the town to talk to us about this and to make suggestions and to provide us with the information that the town so ably usually provides for us, and it brings into clear relief how wonderful the staff members are and how much we rely on them, because it's a little disorienting not to have that. I think the gag order that's in place here, that people are not allowed to talk and there's so many things that we can't know, is a hindrance. I'm not sure to whom or to what. But based on what we know, I would not be averse to getting more information if more information were permissible or would come or would make any difference. We'd need somebody to tell us whether or not it would. But as it stands right now with what I know, I am inclined to say yes to this variance. I'm inclined to say, I'm inclined to grant the variance.
Okay, all right. Thank you, ma'am. So it's down to the chair's comments at this point. I agree with many of my colleagues, and in fact, maybe all of them. This is a very difficult case for a number of reasons. And I think Dr. Ponder articulated those, one, of course, not being able to ask staff questions in the way we normally can, or to have a staff report in the way we normally can, certainly is a challenge for us. But notwithstanding that, we do have the applicant's information, and the applicant has a right to make the application and to present their case, notwithstanding whatever constraints there are upon staff. And we need to honor that opportunity for the applicant to come before us and for us to make a decision. The circumstances of this property, I agree that there are a number of unusual circumstances. The 30-foot adjacent use setback is bothersome to me, especially because it can change in a mixed-use area. Which one do we have? Do we have a 15-foot one or a 30-foot one? It kind of depends on what happens next door. What happens next door? Is it based on this week or last month or 2 years ago, as to which one of those adjacent use setbacks to apply? But certainly with the type as shown on the site plan, the survey, pardon me, the title pond, pardon me, or the marshland area certainly affects this property, as does that 20-foot easement on the side shared with lot 9. And I am greatly troubled by the 2015 letter, and also by whatever happened with the town after that, which remains to some extent a mystery to us. I'm not sure, if we have the choice of continuing the matter and subpoenaing witnesses, we have that opportunity if we wanted to avail ourselves of that. But I think I might ask at this point of Ms. Bush, if we did that, could the town staff testify? Because we don't want to continue the matter and subpoena witnesses and then have them only respond that, well, I can't respond. Ms. Bush, if you could address that question, and then I'll conclude my comments.
Yes, ma'am. The town's position, unless something changed from the court, the town's position will remain the same, that we must remain neutral. And to the extent that any of the questions that the board wants to ask vary into that purview, it's going to be the same. Certainly, you can subpoena, and you absolutely could ask questions of anybody that's here today, but the direction from legal to the town staff is to, in essence, let the evidence come in, argument made by Mr. Pritchard, information from Mr. Scott, but that we are to stay out of it. It's not appropriate for us to involve ourselves in something that's under, in essence, the order of the court. The mediation agreement basically becomes the court order, that these two sides have agreed this is what's going to take place. And my position, and Mr. Coltrane as well, has been that being the case, we are to stay out of it.
Well, let me ask this question, and Mr. Fingerhut, if I'm not accurately describing what you're, and I know there might be a series of questions, but I think the initial question, Ms. Bush, is if we subpoena Ms. Siren to testify, being the author of the 2015 letter, can she answer the question, did you ever retract the town's position set forth in the 2015 letter? That is a fact question. Not giving an opinion, but did you ever retract, or are you aware of anyone else on town staff who retracted, either in writing or verbally, that determination in the 2015 letter? Can Ms. Siren respond to that question?
I think her response would be that at this point, she's been directed not to offer any opinion or any further information to the board, and that the board has to decide based on the 4 conditions whether or not they're met.
Madam Chair, if I could speak to that, Madam Chair, forgive me, but that is completely unacceptable. It seems to me there's staying neutral, and then there's withholding the tools that this board needs to make a decision. I understand what the parameters are here. Remaining neutral is not remaining silent for fact questions. If any of us would ask a question like, well, what do you think about this? I mean, to me, okay, that's objection sustained, because that is not a fact question. But to ask Ms. Siren about that letter and what happened afterwards are fact questions. And I don't think that she or the town of Hilton Head can refuse to answer them. And honestly, they, in my view, should not be asking us to do this in a vacuum, because to do so is not to remain neutral. It's to put their thumb on the scale, because the testimony we've received thus far is not giving us the full story. And by not giving us the full story, it invites us to make an incorrect decision. And I think we're all here to make the correct decisions. So notwithstanding what I said to Mr. Walzak earlier, I move that we subpoena Ann Siren to testify about the September 2nd, 2015 letter and continue this hearing until we get adequate answers from her and anybody else who comes up during the testimony who has relevant information.
And
It's not fair to ask us to do this.
Is that
with
your
all due
motion, David?
respect,
That is my motion.
Then I will second that motion.
And there is a second by Mr. Walzak. And part of the discussion, Ms. Bush, you have some sort of response.
yes, ma'am. I was just going to say, with all due respect, what happened in 2015 or 2018 is not relevant. You've got the facts before you now. You can decide whether or not the conditions are met, and that's what should be looked at.
I'm
Because
sorry,
in
are you
essence,
expressing an opinion, counsel? You just expressed an opinion. You told me it's not relevant? I want to know what the facts are. You said you can't express an opinion. We're getting conflicting messages from the town, and I don't really think that's what you intend to do, but that's what you're
no,
doing.
sir. And I'm not trying to be cagey. It's just simply trying to do what I believe that a mediation agreement demands. And that is that the terms which include this hearing are allowed to, it's permitted to go forward, and that staff does not try to influence the board one way or the other. And my fear is that and I would say that there has been support. Tyler put up whichever maps you all were looking for. We did provide support. We're just simply attempting the best that we can to allow this decision to be made without any recommendations one way or the other from the town of Hilton Head Island.
Excuse me, Madam Chairman, could I say something here?
Yes, is that you, Dr. Ponder?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. We are now having board discussion of the motion in front of us, the
Thank
motion
you.
which has been seconded. So go ahead, Dr. Ponder.
I just have a comment on Ms. Bush's comments. I respect your comments and thank you for weighing in. However, to use the terms "I believe" and "my fear" further suggests opinion, not fact.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
I don't think you're helping us. I don't think you're helping to get this where you think it needs to go, which of course is once again opinion. So I think what she just said is not helpful.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ponder. I think it might be helpful, as I understand the motion, is to subpoena Ms. Sarin. And was there anyone else on the list, Mr. Fingerhut, in addition to Ms. Sarin, to subpoena?
Well, she's the author of the letter, and I unfortunately, because we're in the dark, it's very dark in here. My sense is that Ms. Lewis has information, but she's uncomfortable testifying, and I can understand why, since the attorney for the town is uncomfortable having her do it, and she doesn't want to get herself in trouble. I don't want to speak for her, but I get that. But we're entitled to elicit facts. So that she would certainly be somebody on my short list. But if she's not going to testify, it seems to be a futile exercise.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're clear on the motion while we have discussion. And because depending upon the action on the motion, the chair will be needing assistance at preparing and having served subpoenas.
Then I think
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry.
Someone was, Dr. Ponder, I recognize you. Go ahead.
Then I think the discussion that we as a board need to have without perhaps any additional input is we have to make a decision right now as to whether we think if we had more time, we might actually get information from witnesses.
Yes, ma'am, and that's why I tried to ask the question I asked the question that I did to try to find that out. I'm not sure I did, but
May I speak to that?
I'm sorry, Mr. Finger. Could we let's go around and see what other folks say, and then come back to that. I think.
Madam Chairwoman.
Ms. Bush, no, hang on. The chair is going to recognize folks. Hang on 1 second. Okay.
Madam Chairwoman.
Who is that?
Bob Johnson.
Mr. Johnson. Okay, you have the floor, Mr. Johnson.
Okay, obviously I'm not a legal type. I deferred my comments earlier, but these are to address the motion on the floor. I believe,
Yes.
I believe that we need to make a decision based on the facts that are in front of us today. I believe that the variance, although we do have extenuating circumstances or a difficult lot, that the degree of the variance is extraordinary also, and that that in fact a fence and a mobile food truck can very easily be moved with very little expense. Not that that's our purview, but my I don't think all four of the criteria have been met, and I think that that my opinion would that we should go forward with a denial, and that's what I believe.
Okay, so you're speaking in opposition to the motion to continue and subpoena witnesses.
Absolutely.
Let's leave it at that. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
I think we need to use the current facts to base our opinion.
Okay, let me go in some order here. So that was Mr. Johnson speaking. Mr. Walczak, I'm going to come back to you. Just on the motion itself.
I'd like to call the motion.
Well,
Call the question.
Yes, sir, I understand that, but the chair is going to say that we need to have the other board members offer their comments on it before we call the motion.
Okay,
so,
fine.
Ms. Loudermilk, do you have a position on the motion on the floor?
A position.
Again, we're in a vacuum. We don't know if we're going to receive additional information if we call for the witnesses or not. And now I'm asking, I guess you, Madam Chairman, or if we subpoena the witnesses, how quickly can we get this back in front of us? The whole situation obviously has been going on for at least 2 years, and it does demand and require a resolution. So how quickly can we get this back in front of us? Is there an answer to that?
Yeah, I'm going to have to ask a staff member that question in just a moment. But before I do that, if I could, let me see if there's other questions,
Sure.
Other procedural questions. So maybe we can fold them in at one time. So putting that momentarily to the side, any other questions or comments on the motion itself?
I would just like to say one more thing. I mean, this letter that we're dealing with was presented to us, by the applicant, and I think it has significance. So we should investigate it further before we make any decisions. That makes sense to me. So
Okay.
that's okay.
So having seconded the motion, you're in favor of the motion. So, okay, thank you. Let's see. I apologize. I'm looking at a list that I've checked a couple times. Mr. White, did I ask for comments from you on this motion?
You have, but I guess my biggest concern is Mr. Scott has, over the last number of years, been dealing with delay and subterfuge and everything else on behalf of the town, and it's bothering me that we are being forced to do the same thing. I do think that David's point about making absolutely sure that we understand is appropriate, but the delay is something that is seriously troubling me.
Okay, thank you.
Yet I don't think we have a consensus within the group to make a viable decision.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. And I promise I would circle back to Mr. Fingerhut on the discussion on this motion.
No, I've heard everybody else's comments, and I guess I don't need to add any more words to this. But I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay.
Maybe if we could vote on the motion.
Okay, all right. Let me just, I know Ms. Bush wanted to say something, but before she does that, Ms. Lurk or Ms. Haley or Mr. Newman, can you address the question of Ms. Loudermilk about how soon, if the board adopts this motion, how soon this could come back before the board? And if we need Ms. Bush to weigh in on, is there a time requirement for serving subpoenas that we need to give folks an opportunity to respond? So somehow wrap that question together, and if Ms. Bush needs to respond first, that's fine, only on that question, or the staff to tell us how soon it can come back before us. So Ms. Bush, if you want to address that first, that's fine.
Yes, ma'am. I do not know the answer as to how long in South Carolina a subpoena you have to give a person to respond. Mr. Coltrane, perhaps you can help me out with that. And I certainly don't think that the town is going to be adversarial in that regard.
There's really no limit on that. I mean, you can serve a subpoena on someone to show up, later today. Okay.
All right. Then let's ask either Ms. Haley, Ms. Loic, or Mr. Newman. Could this matter come back before us either at our next regular meeting or at a special meeting? And what time period would be required? Because we would be only continuing the matter, not starting over again. Anybody got a sense of the timing?
Madam Chair, this is Teresa.
Yes, ma'am.
The matter could be continued until the board's next regular meeting, which is in May, or the board could call a special meeting. That would depend on the meeting calendar availability and the board member availability, and of course the applicants.
Okay. And is there a 24 or 48-hour notice requirement for continuation of our meeting?
For a special meeting, there's a requirement for 48 hours in advance notice. If I could defer to Diane or Curtis on the virtual meeting ordinance, if that has any impact on how soon we could call a special meeting. I know there are meeting notice requirements. I believe it's 5 days to post an agenda for a virtual meeting.
Any response from Ms. Bush or Mr. Coltrane on that?
I'm afraid I don't know the answer.
Mr. Coltrane.
Oh, I beg your pardon. It's 5 days.
Okay.
Teresa is correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think that's as much information as we can get on that procedural question. And to be fair, Ms. Bush, you wanted to comment on the motion somehow?
Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to say that any of the written materials that the town sent to Mr. Scott, we would certainly provide.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So now we're to Mr. Wolczak's request to call the motion. I'll ask Ms. Haley to call the roll on the motion.
Mr. Wolczak.
For the motion.
Mr. White.
For the motion.
Ms. Loudermilk.
For the motion.
Mr. Johnson.
Against the motion.
Mr. Fingerhut.
For the motion.
Dr. Ponder.
For the motion.
Ms. Bryson.
With some regret for the delay, I will vote in favor of the motion.
Motion carries 6-1.
Okay. So this matter will be continued to either a special or regular meeting. Can I get a sense from the board of would you like to try for a special or the next regular meeting? And then also Richard, if you could respond to that.
Madam Chairman, it doesn't really matter to me whether you go to a regularly scheduled meeting or a special meeting. You know, it just depends on what it is, and also what other scheduled matters that I have. I just don't know what I've got out there.
Yeah, yes, sir. Ms. Haley, can you remind us of the date of our next regularly scheduled meeting? Is it May 24th?
Yes, Madam Chair, May 24th at 2:30.
Okay. Mr. Pritchard, do you have your calendar available to check that date?
Yes, ma'am. I have a hearing at 10 a.m., but I don't think it'll last, any substantial amount of time.
Okay. All right. Well, our regular meetings are at 2:30 in the afternoon. At this point, Ms. Lewick, I don't think we know yet whether we would have any other business for that May meeting, or what we might be able to do if you're held up is to put you later on the agenda. Ms. Lewick, do we know?
I can do 2:30.
Okay. All
as
right.
entertaining as it was, I would like to go first.
Okay. All right. Well, I think generally the practice would be, if a matter is continued, to have it, absent call the roll and approval of the minutes and agenda, et cetera, to have it come up first. Let's see. Is there anybody else? Ms. Bush, that'd be a regular meeting, so I would assume staff would be available.
Yes, ma'am. If you have it scheduled for the regular meeting, absolutely.
Okay, all right. And because the motion is to direct that there be subpoenas issued, the chair will ask for assistance from the town attorney or the staff attorney, because I guess that subpoena would go out under the signature of the chair. So if you can assist with preparing it, then as soon as it's prepared, I'll be happy to sign it so it can be served. And I would need, of course, the chair would note that either staff attorney or town attorney would be responsible for service. It's certainly not something I don't think the chair has to do. But
yes, and we would accept service.
Okay, all right. So
I would accept on behalf of the staff.
You will assist with preparing the subpoena and accept service both. That's kind of unusual, but I guess.
May I just have a question about the subpoena?
Yes, sir.
We're talking about the person who wrote the letter. That would be
yes.
a subpoena. But aren't we going to also subpoena records from that? In other words, the entire file, perhaps from that point in time forward?
Well, when you subpoena a witness, usually you can ask them to bring certain records to which they have access. Is my recollection, is that accurate in South Carolina, Ms. Bush?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So any and all records that pertain to this matter would be presented?
Well, the matter is a bit broad, but I suppose that would hopefully capture the net of it. That would include the net of everything we need to capture. Is there any? This is kind of a crazy question to ask, but is there any objection by Mr. Pritchard or Ms. Bush to including that broad description of documents in the subpoena?
Well, to the extent that any of those documents offer a recommendation or an opinion, then
okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't think we would mean to be asking for that. I think we need to have all the documents and records relating to this application and to the September, and I apologize for not remembering that, September 2015. I don't remember the exact date of the letter. I'll find that out. And I'm going to look to Mr. Fingerhut. Does that fairly and accurately describe what we are asking for?
Yeah, actually, Charlie's description was fine. The Ms. Siren, who wrote the letter of September 2nd, 2015, and any and all records from the town pertaining to this matter, removing anything that has a recommendation or an opinion or an internal memo between council and staff and that sort of thing. That
Right.
would come out.
Right.
Just fact.
Redacted.
Okay. All right.
Madam Chairman, to sort of answer the question that was asked of me, certainly it's within your purview to subpoena anything you'd like. Once the subpoena is issued, it would then be up to me to determine whether or not any of the documents would be objectionable. And I would then work with town council and we would sort through those issues. But you can ask whatever you want, whether you get it or not, sort of up to me and others. But certainly ask for what you want, and then we'll sort it out from there.
Okay.
Keep in mind that in front of this panel, the chair rules on objections.
Yes. Yes.
There are judges that do get to make an ultimate opinion.
Madam Chair, this is Dr. Ponder. I'm sorry, I have a hard stop at 6 o'clock. I have a hard stop at 6 o'clock.
I think we're about to wrap it up, except for the staff report, et cetera. I think we have enough information now for the chair to work with the staff attorney on the subpoena. And then we will serve it. And then if there's any objections, the chair will rule on those objections, absent having to take something to circuit court. But I will do my best in working with the staff to get the subpoena ready and to rule on any objections. Any other questions about how we proceed?
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
this is
Yes, ma'am.
Teresa.
Yes, ma'am.
If the board would like to continue the matter, I would ask that the board make a motion to do that and to keep the public hearing open
Yes, ma'am.
for public notice requirements.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that point. I know we talked about that, but I think the motion was actually to subpoena witnesses. So we need a motion to continue this matter to the May 24. Do I have the right date again?
Madam
May
Chair?
20.
Yes, ma'am.
I think we should have probably restated the motion before we voted on it, but I distinctly recall David say that we should continue it and then a subpoena at the same. So I think it's already in there, but we can do it again, I guess.
I think just that part.
Yeah, okay.
So,
all right.
So the chair will. Yes, Reese. Good point. I thought I captured that, but I think to make the record clear to a specific date, because then generally we talked about when could we do it somewhere in there. So this will make it to a specific day and time. So the chair would entertain a motion to continue this matter being variance 000-818-2021, 15 Marshland Road, to the regular meeting of the board on May 24 at 2:30 p.m. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Mr. Finger, second by Mr. Walczak. Is that right?
White.
No, sorry, he's on the phone.
White.
Mr. White. Okay, any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, Ms. Haley, will you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. White,
For the motion.
Ms. Loudermilk,
For the motion.
Mr. Johnson,
For the motion.
Mr. Fingerhut,
For the motion.
Dr. Ponder,
For the motion.
Hold on a minute. Sorry.
Mr. Walczak.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My doctor just called, so I had to take the call. But I'm for the motion.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Bryson.
For the motion.
Motion carried. 7-0.
Thank you all. Is there anything else on this particular matter that we need to tend to before we go on to the next item on the agenda? All right. Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Pritchard, Mr. Scott, and I apologize, Ms. Rospaldo, if I said that correctly, Mr. Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you. You may leave if you want to. You're welcome to stay with us. We have a few more items of board business to take care of.
I appreciate that. I've seen several hundred zoning meetings, so the thrill is gone.
I understand. Thank you all. Okay, the next item is board business to me, and just a reminder of our training this Thursday at 10 a.m. And Ms. Haley, I cannot remember, have you sent us out a Blue Jean invitation yet, or will you be sending that?
Madam Chair, I have not sent that out. I wanted to wait until this meeting was finished so I didn't confuse you all.
Oh, thank you. That's probably a good idea.
Yeah, I will send that out first thing tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. The only other thing, not to belabor this point, but just thinking about our discussion of the previous variance request where the board was concerned about lot sizes. And we have previously discussed requests for consideration of LMO amendments. And I would suggest that we add to our next agenda a discussion of consideration of whether or not there should be LMO amendments on lot sizes and setbacks, which have come before us before and came before us today. So without objection, I'll ask staff to put that on our next regular meeting agenda. So that takes us to the staff report. And the first item is the status of the LMO amendments. If Ms. Dixon is available or if there's another staff member to respond to that.
I'm here, I'm available.
Thank you, ma'am.
I do not have any update since the last meeting where we talked about this topic, other than to say we've narrowed down our list and put them in some kind of order as far as what would be appropriate taking it forward first. We've got a huge list that we started working on last year. So we've refined that list and have put it into some kind of schedule where we'll have a couple different sets that will be taken forward this year. But that is as far as we've gotten so far. There'll be some standalone amendments and then a general set that we'll take forward a couple times this year. So other than that, I don't really have a status update as far as when it'll start the process and go to LMO committee.
Okay. And once the staff decides on that schedule, if you could send that to the board as soon as possible.
We will. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The next item on the agenda is the status of amendments to the BZA rules of procedure. And Ms. Lewick or Ms. Bush, whoever wants to respond.
Sure, I can respond. Ms. Bush and I have met and started the discussion and the research into this matter. We do not yet have a markup version to share. We do need to have another meeting to do a little bit more research, but as soon as we have something put together, we'll keep this agenda item on, but we'll share a markup and have a discussion with the board as soon as we have it ready.
Okay. All right. Thank you, ma'am. And I'm sorry, any board member have any questions about these items, please just jump in. I'm not going to go down a list again, so I'm trying to get us done. So the next item is the waiver report. We have a written waiver report from Ms. Lewick. And I think to expedite matters, I would just ask if there are any questions of the board about the waiver report. All right. And I would ask the staff to continue putting the status of LMO amendments, the amendments to the rules of procedure. And of course, we always have the waiver report in there on the next agenda. Any other matter to come before the board before I adjourn?
Madam Chairman,
Yes,
I want to apologize for that hiccup that I just had a few minutes ago. But when your doctor calls, you got to talk to him because he's after hours, and I apologize, but I had to really take the call.
No apology necessary from to the chair, certainly. And as I always said, if a member of my family calls twice, I'm going to turn it over to somebody else, so because it will be an emergency. So no worries from the chair.
This wasn't an emergency. It was just something that I had to talk to him about. So,
I totally understand. Whatever it was, no worries. So any other business to come before the board? If not, I declare the meeting adjourned at 6:03 p.m. with great thanks to everyone for their patience during a very tough hearing today. So thank you all and good night.
Thank you.